I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Camarillo Sanitary District. May we have a roll call, please?
Director Kildee?
Here.
Director Martinez-Bravo?
Here.
Director Tremblay?
Here.
Secretary Tennyson?
Here.
And Chair Santangelo.
Here. And Dr. Martinez-Bravo, will you lead us in the flag salute?
Sure. Please stand. Put your right hand over your heart. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Are there any public comments for the Camarillo Sanitary District? Hearing and seeing none, we'll move ahead to the consent calendar. Are there any changes to the consent calendar? Anything that needs to be pulled?
No.
Move approval.
No, second.
And Madam Chair, may I just have one comment on items B and C?
Sure, go ahead.
Before the vote. Just for the record, and I want to thank Public Works staff and thank Mr. Klotzel. For once, we have prices going in a downward trajectory rather than an upward trajectory. On the sodium bisulfite, which is very costly, the city is currently paying $1.90 per gallon. Our new contract price will be $1.36 per gallon. It's a substantial savings. And on the sodium hypochlorite, we're currently paying $2.19 per gallon, and the new contract price will be $1.76 per gallon. So thankfully, at least with respect to one, prices are going a little down, and I think that also reflects well on Public Works staff since we went back out to bid as well. We took that chance, so thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Sure. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Let's have a roll call vote.
Director Kildee?
Yes.
Director Martinez-Bravo?
Yes.
Director Tremblay?
Yes.
Secretary Tennyson?
Yes.
And Chair Santangelo.
Yes. Okay, that brings us to discussion items, and we have none tonight. Are there any board or staff member comment or reports? Seeing none and hearing none, we'll go ahead and adjourn this meeting.
All right, call this meeting of the successor agency to order. Let the record reflect that all members are here. Are there any public comments for the successor agency? All right, hearing none. We have a consent calendar, items A and B. Do I hear a motion?
I'll move.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Martinez-Bravo?
Yes.
Councilmember Santangelo?
Yes.
Councilmember Tennyson?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Kildee?
Yes.
And Mayor Tremblay.
Yes. All right, the record will reflect that was adopted on a unanimous vote. Any discussion items? Hearing none. Board comments? Staff comments? Ooh, we're on a roll. Okay. We're now going to call to order the City Council and let the record reflect that all council members are here. Let's start with council, I'm sorry, before we do that, any staff comments? Mr. Ramirez? Anybody? All right, let's start with council comments. Who wants to start tonight?
I can start. It's nice and easy.
Councilmember Martinez-Bravo.
I just have May 25th to report. I attended the Ventura County Leadership Academy luncheon with Councilmember Santangelo and Councilmember Tennyson.
That was quick.
And that is it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Councilmember Santangelo.
Okay, on April 25th, I also attended the Ventura County Leadership Awards. I also attended the Economic Development and Land Use Committee meeting. And on May 2nd, I attended the CPA Board of Directors meeting. And that's all I have.
Who wants to go next? Councilmember Tennyson.
Along with Councilmember Santangelo, I attended the Economic Development and Land Use Committee. I was at the VCLA Leadership Awards on April 25th. On May 3rd, I had the opportunity to volunteer for food distribution at the Camarillo Community Center with Pleasant Valley Recreation and Park District. The food is provided by Food Share of Ventura County, and every Friday they do this distribution at the library. You can go on the Rec and Park District website and sign up to volunteer. We serve 200 vehicles driving through the food service area, and it just shows that as affluent as the city of Camarillo is, we still have the need for people to be able to afford to eat. So I'd encourage everyone to go to their website, 2.5 hours of your time, maybe 3 hours. Some of the work's pretty light and pretty easy. Some of it's pretty heavy, and you can pick what you want to do. But I'd encourage everyone to go there, and I'd ask the city manager and city staff to invite Food Share to a future meeting to give a presentation on the number of households that they serve in Camarillo specifically, Ventura County, on the macro level, but you'll be surprised at how many households they serve in Camarillo. So I'd appreciate a future presentation from Food Share of Ventura County. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Fildy?
Yes, just one thing. I had the pleasure May 4th, Saturday, to give an Eagle Scout award, and it was to a fellow by the name of Connor Kitchen. And what was kind of neat about that is I actually was able to present it at the Boy Scouts facility on Daily Drive. And I don't know if anybody here has been in that facility here, but pretty sure I've been in there one time, but it's been quite a long time ago. It's right next to Steve Thomas BMW. And got there, and really a fine young man had mentioned, I know our mayor, I believe, is an Eagle Scout as well. Is that correct? Yes. And asked about you and the other council members, and I said I was the best they could do on short notice, so they accepted me for being there. So gave the award, and it's always a pleasure to be able to give an Eagle Scout. I think it's less than 5% of scouts that start scouts actually wound up as Eagle Scouts, so it's really memorable and a great family. And come to find out, his mother actually is a special ed teacher, and my wife, Janet, actually trained under her for special education, and she was my wife's mentor. I had no idea. I think I'd met her maybe one time, but I didn't know who she was. But when I got home, my wife put 2 and 2 together, and it was a memorable evening on a lot of ways. So I thank the mayor for allowing me to do that.
Thank you for covering that.
Sure.
All right, for meetings attended, on April 26th, I had a meeting of the Metrolink Board of Directors in Los Angeles. On April 29th, the Las Personas Community Academy, and we're going to come back to that one in just a minute. On May 1st, I chaired the nominating committee for the California Association of Sanitation Agencies Board of Directors. And then on May 4, I had the privilege of attending a fundraiser for Santa Rosa Technology Magnet School, which was fun. Item 2, for the city's 60th anniversary that we're all aware of, I want to make sure that people are aware of this, and anybody who is watching on YouTube. In celebration of the city of Camarillo's 60th anniversary, the Camarillo Public Library, right here, is launching Camarillo Connections, its first multicultural event. That will occur on Sunday, May 19, from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. It's a family-friendly event, and it invites local cultural heritage organizations to express and share their rich experiences, stories, and traditions. Cultural performances will include Tahitian dancing, Bollywood dancing, an East Asian musical concert, and a special Mexican folklorico fusion show. And the event is free and appropriate for all ages. So I hope that people will be able to come. I don't know about the dancing. My dancing days are long since gone, particularly any of the dancing is long since gone. But the one thing I did want to share for a minute or two tonight, I want to give a shout out to Chantel Lamone and to Michelle Dana of our city staff. They are in the midst of a multi-week community academy for members of our community, a whole cross-section of members of our community that meet here in the library, except they got booted out tonight. They're over at the Sheriff's Department because we're here tonight in a special meeting. But it's an opportunity to learn more about the city of Camarillo and all of its different facets. Again, it's the Las Personas Community Academy, and Ms. Lamone has worked, and Ms. Dana has worked incredibly hard on it. And I had the privilege last Monday of basically hosting the event. It was all on the quality of life in Camarillo, and they set it up kind of like a fireside chat, except there was no fire, by the way, but just 2 chairs up in front with a microphone and speaking back and forth. But we didn't want the event to be simply the city passing on information to the participants. We wanted it to be interactive. So guess what? We put Post-it stickers in front of everybody, and at the end of the evening, we asked them, if you had one issue that you wanted to bring to the city council's attention on what would improve the quality of life in Camarillo, what would it be? And so, and forgive me because you won't be able to read these from here, these are the Post-it stickers from this event. But I want to read to you what the issues were that were brought to my attention, and I said that I would pass them on to members of the city council and city staff in my council comments tonight. Among them are the following: affordable housing for young and growing families, accessible public transportation, developing a future workforce for the 22nd century, attracting businesses with tax incentives, high tech, continuing to develop Cal State University Channel Islands and leverage relationships with local businesses and the university to encourage hiring. Slow the build out of housing within the city. So you can see the counter pressures, right? Increase affordable housing, but slow the build out of housing. Unique challenges that we all face on this dais. Youth leadership development, for example, a youth city council. A legacy board for special projects development, more affordable housing, better or a closer relationship with Cal State University Channel Islands, save the 99-cent store. That's a popular one in town. Fill empty retail spaces like the Soup Plantation building and the building next to Harbor Freight. More options for affordable housing. Are you hearing a pattern? Limit big corporations into the city that destroy small business. Limit development of the empty land. Farmland is too valuable to destroy. More and better concerts in the park. I don't know about dancing that goes along with that, but more and better concerts. Free internet. Community garden. We still need more work on including all community members when doing events, making sure we're inclusive of everyone. An increased partnership among public schools and the library. Find a resolution for the train tracks growing through the city, especially the ones near Rancho Campana and the library. More events for adults without kids, not just alcohol events. I'm reading, by the way, strictly from the Post-it stickers. I'm not editing this. City council, more involved with community nonprofits, especially for kids, showing up to the Academic Olympic City Finals and talking to students or the Boys and Girls Club prelims. Increased airport activities, invite non-aviation activities. Allow hairstylists to work from home, as I believe Thousand Oaks does. Community gardens, group mental health wellness classes, conservation exercises, safety in school and communities, affordable housing, and lower electricity payments. Those were the 30 suggestions that came in to improve quality of life in our city. And I want to thank all of the members of our community who are participating in the Community Academy. I want to thank again our staff for putting on a great, it's a multi-week, I think it's 6 weeks, Michelle, 6 weeks, our Community Academy. Anyway, it's great, and I will at a break, I will put these Post-it stickers and the board over here in case anybody would like to see them. Because I didn't make this up, by the way. All right. All right, that's it from, and you certainly heard enough from me on council comments. Let's see, we're now going to go to, before we go, all right, we're going to go to presentations, and we are really looking forward to this one. This is item A, and this is a presentation for our Southern California Edison Scholarship recipient, and I would like to recognize and call to the dais, or call the microphone, Andrew Thomas, Mr. Andrew Thomas from Southern California Edison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and to the council and to staff. I thank you for this opportunity to present in this fashion. There is I guess, a colloquialism usually for awkward situations that say we should stop meeting like this. But unlike that, I'd like to meet like this every year because we, for the second year in a row, that is the city of Camarillo, Southern California Edison is announcing that you have a Edison Scholar amongst you. And that is in the person of Camarillo senior Carlos Valencia, who was recognized at his school a couple of weeks ago for its efforts. Edison Scholars is a program that is purely funded by stakeholder funds. It goes throughout our 50,000 square mile service area. So he is up against and won against some very high caliber young men and women. and he was selected one of 30 awardees of our scholarship that is given over the 4-year increments. For those who are studying STEM field degrees, and we know that that is expanding. I think Carlos will share about his pursuits of engineering, but we know that that includes a lot of other areas, including now data analysis and other things. So it continues to expand as that criteria expands. We're very excited. It goes for somebody who has like 3.0 or higher, of which he well has, and probably had never seen what a 3.0 looks like. He is also going to be studying a STEM field degree. And this also offers an opportunity as he goes through his 4 years to also take part in our internship programs, and there are opportunities within those for paid internships. So we have undoubtedly are trying to launch a great career, which we know we have, but we also want to help ourselves and maybe bring him back to the fold. But also, I can see him suited and fitted up for one of those seats that you're sitting in, so be careful because he's coming. I'd like to take a moment to recognize him. He is going to be, he was recognized this weekend at a recognition event that we had. We'll continue to do that. I know he is not unfamiliar with your city council. He is a rising star. So I do want to celebrate a seed planted in good soil, that is your city, and all the things that Camarillo High is doing to generate scholars like him, from last year's winner, Christina Agapian, and this year's winner, Mr. Carlos Valencia. I'd like to have him come up and share some words, and we'll share the recognition. He is the winner of our $50,000 scholarship. Let's give him a hand.
Good afternoon, City Council. I'd first like to thank my special guest that I have here, which is my parents, and Yvonne Saros, and of course we have our very important guests from the school district, as well as a counselor from my school. And I'd like to first start off by really congratulating Edison. If it wasn't for the generosity of Edison International, this scholarship would not be available. And this scholarship is truly life-changing. And it's really gonna be able to open up not only my door for higher education, but the door of 30 other scholars this year. And that is truly something that is gonna pay off in the long time. Because any investment made in education is a worthwhile investment. And that is also part of the reason why I want to sincerely thank all of you and all of your efforts to invest in our early education. I first attended La Mariposa Elementary School, and that was a wonderful opportunity for me to then go to Las Colinas Middle School and now Adolfo Camarillo High School. And this entire time, I've always been very appreciative of what Camarillo has been able to offer us and the community which we have built here. Our quote is, "Las personas son la ciudad," which translates to, "The people are the city." And there's no other greater example of the people than this room we have here. We have a very diverse group of people from very diverse backgrounds, and this is, to me, what truly represents Camarillo. The ability now to be able to take this scholarship and use it for my future education is going to be something that will forever change the path of my life and will allow me to explore a degree in STEM. We talked about kind of what that degree might be, but he didn't mention it. It was aerospace engineering. So next year, my intended major for Stanford is aerospace engineering. And the reason why I selected this career was because of the rigor that it presents and the wide, diverse skill set which it gives a lot of people. And not every aerospace engineer has to end up practicing aerospace engineering. When I had the opportunity last week to visit the Edison program, I had the opportunity to meet aerospace engineers that were even working close in the aerospace field. They were working with Edison in managerial positions, and some of them had never even practiced engineering from the minute that they left from the minute they graduated college, which is truly exciting because that means that you are being equipped with the skills to be a very valuable asset to society and contribute to the greater continuation and development of the community around you. And that is something which I'm very excited to look forward to. In high school, I had the opportunity to join our robotics program. This was a program that is called the Scorps Robotics. And every year we compete in a competition called the First Robotics Competition. And so for those of you that aren't familiar, this is an international competition with teams from all over the world. We have teams from Taiwan, we have teams from Mexico, we have teams from China. There's teams literally from all 6 continents that come and are competing for the top spot in this competition. And students get 8 weeks to design and develop a robot. And this has been one of the most instrumental and fundamental aspects of my interest in engineering, and has truly shaped how I see myself coming into engineering in the future years. Another program that has been foundational has been the MESA program, which stands for Mathematics, Engineering, Science, and Achievement. And this program is very unique because it's a partnership between the University of California, Santa Barbara, and a local high school. And what this has been able to do is it allows for students to get mentorship from higher education directly where students need it most, with first-generation, low-income students. And this type of partnership is what had a very significant impact on my life and the life of other students around me. I mean, I can't even begin to express how thankful I am for these programs and what kind of change they can bring to our community and the type of developments that they will lead to and the exciting things that they will bring in the future. One of the programs which, on top of these two, which has been fundamental, is the AVID program. AVID stands for Advancement via Individual Determination. And today we have one of our counselors here from the AVID program, Mr. Hugo Tapia. And Mr. Tapia was the first counselor I met when I came into high school. And he has been able to help me out all 4 years. And something that is very different about this AVID program is that they not only try to build students academically, but they also encourage involvement and collaboration within the classroom. And this really makes not only for a classroom environment, but a family environment. And this really helps students and supports students through hard academic classes, and it's something that I really hope we can see implement further in our education systems. So to wrap this up, I really want to thank my family, Edison, and the city of Camarillo for this wonderful opportunity, and I can't wait to make the most of it and pay it forward to our next communities. Thank you.
You can obviously see why I wanted to get off the mic and let him just show himself. Sometimes you just have to unveil and let it glow. He did mention he's going to Stanford. His accolades are a litany of things between athletic, social, and civic, and athletic as well. So he's a threat across a lot of areas. I won't be playing soccer against him, but I definitely want to just thank you for this opportunity. He will be joining since 2006. Over 760 Edison scholars that we've had now in our programs, and they're at various places across, I'm sure, the region and the globe. Our scholarship opportunity can be found at edisonscholars.com. edisonscholars.com, that is for the folks out there who know young people, talented young people. They can find more information about it. The scholarship portal is closed, but when it opens, we will ask you, please, 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 I know the school superintendent and others are here to share that information so we can three-peat out here in Camarillo again and have other scholars be awarded so they can thrive, come back and contribute, because I know that's definitely something that Carlos is going to be doing as well. So thank you for your time. I know the council has been at various Edison events from two of our EOC. I've seen them at LULAC and other local events. Definitely appreciate you doing that, and to continue the collaboration on other fronts so we can continue to supply safe and reliable service to your city. So thank you so much for the staff who put this together, for collaborating. And definitely just want to thank all those as family. You again are that soil that helped a seed grow, as well as the city and Camarillo High. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thomas. Just in case anybody arrived late, we took some pictures prior to the council meeting. The council presented Carlos with a certificate of recognition, so we did all kinds of pictures. But I think my fellow council members probably have a few things to say, and I looked over here first. I'm going to start with Councilmember Tennyson.
Wow. I mean, absolutely amazing. What an articulate and energetic young man. Mom and Dad, I've often told people that our legacy as parents isn't what we accomplish. It's what our children and their children do. And your legacy is in absolutely phenomenal hands with this young man. You guys are going to have a great legacy as he moves forward in his education. I feel like I just heard comments, and I've counted them now. I think I just heard comments from the 53rd President of the United States of America, and I hope I live long enough to see that. Congratulations, and keep the positive attitude and keep moving forward.
Wow.
Vice Mayor Kildee.
Tough act to follow. Congratulations, Carlos. I want to congratulate too your mom and dad and any other family member that are here because I know it's an extremely challenging job and you know, forever, but now especially. And you've got an outstanding young man here, and I want to commend you for that. And the educators too that helped him along in his journey, and his neighbor that helped him along his journey. And it's often been said it takes a village, and it does here, that there's a lot of hands that had to, you know, mix up what we have today, and it's a really good thing. So congratulations, Carlos. I'm really happy for you. Stanford, you're on your way to do some really great things. So really happy for you and all your family and friends and everybody in this building here tonight is extremely proud and happy for you. So carry on, young man.
Councilmember Martinez Bravo. Oh, whichever.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Wow is right. Super articulate. What a pleasure to listen to you. One of the things that really stood out when I was listening to you speak is how you acknowledged how much the community is important to you, and giving back to the community. So always hold on to that and always give back. Thank you so much, and congratulations.
Councilmember Martinez Bravo.
Thank you, Mayor. Congratulations. This is such a wonderful achievement, and thank you also to Edison for providing this opportunity for these students and also as a pathway to equity. That is something that I find very valuable. I was also the first in my family to go to school. As many of you know, my father was a farm worker right here in Ventura County, and sometimes these scholarships make the difference between being able to move forward or not. So thank you, Edison, for allowing for that to happen. Y felicidades a los papás. Yo sé que esto es algo tan importante para sus hijos, tal y cual también para ustedes. Y muchísimas gracias por criar y darle los valores que se necesitan para seguir adelante. Muchísimas gracias por todo su esfuerzo y felicidades.
Carlos, it's really difficult for me to improve on what my colleagues have said. I'm going to say ditto first. Thank you to Edison for this. This is a real tribute to you, to your family, to your neighbor, Ms. Saras, to your educators. Dr. McCoy, who's the superintendent of the high school district, is here. You have educators here from Adolfo Camarillo High School, and also from Pleasant Valley School District, your teachers from Pleasant Valley School District. All of them have combined together. You have received a wonderful public education here through Oxnard-Union High School District and Pleasant Valley School District, and we recognize that. They are part of the fabric of this community. You are part of the fabric of this community. The only thing that disappoints me just a little bit is that you're not going to my alma mater, University of California, Davis, just up the road, but that's okay. That's a subject for another time. We congratulate you. We really appreciate Edison's efforts on this, and we expect to see you sitting up here in the not too distant future, and maybe president as well. So thanks again, and would everybody please join me in another round of applause for Carlos and his family. And if you and your family decide that you want to stick around and learn about transit services tonight and that major item on the agenda, you are perfectly welcome to. But on the other hand, if you decide that you'd rather go off and celebrate, we certainly understand that too. We understand if Dr. McCoy and others have things to do. And by the way, I know your principal, Mr. Lavelle, would have been here, but he's off doing a CIF matter. So you have a wonderful principal as well. Anyway, congratulations again. All right. With that, it's hard to top that. But now we're going to go on to the consent calendar. And we have items B through L on the consent calendar. Do any members of the council want to pull anything or have any questions on any of the consent calendar items? And if
I'll
not,
move the approval. Oh, sorry.
thank you. No, you're right there. We have a motion for approval,
I'll second the motion.
and we have a second. May I, Madam Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Martinez Bravo,
Yes.
Councilmember Santangelo,
Yes.
Councilmember Tennyson,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Kilby,
Yes.
and Mayor Tremblay.
Yes. Record will reflect that that was approved on a unanimous vote. We now go to our discussion items for the evening. First discussion item is our economic report by our investment advisor.
Yes,
you want to start this off?
I'll start it
Mark?
off by way of introduction.
Great,
We have
thanks.
Chris McCary here, Senior Portfolio Strategist from Chandler Asset Management, and he will do a presentation on economic updates. And Chandler provides this on a quarterly basis to our investment committee, but once a year we have him come in around this time to help us set some context as we go into and approach our budget development and our budget workshop on May 18th. So I'll turn it over to Chris.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members, city staff. Just want to thank everyone for allowing us the opportunity to present our economic overview for the council. So as we move forward 2 pages, if we don't mind, recent economic data has shown above trend growth. The labor market remains healthy. Thank you. The labor market remains healthy. The consumer has actually been fairly resilient in front of some headwinds that we've expected and seen. And overall inflation has been subsiding, coming off of the highs we saw over the past couple of years. But when we talk about the economy, this year, the economy has been dominated by 2 questions. And those are, when is the Fed going to have their first rate cut? And how many rate cuts are we going to see in 2024? In a sense, the timing and the magnitude of those cuts. The Fed gave the expectation to the market at the beginning of this year, actually at their December meeting, that we could see 3 rate cuts in 2024, and the fact that they had meet peak tightening coming off of the high inflation numbers that we've saw over the previous years. As we've moved through the year, the first quarter, the economy has, in a sense, returned a little bit better than what was expected over the overall market, and from that we've seen volatility, especially with yields across the curve increasing by about 60 basis points from the beginning of the year. A lot of that has to do with, first off, the labor market, the employment picture, has been very resilient from what we've seen, and by historical standards, the labor market is very healthy. As of the production of this report, you can see here in March, we had 303,000 jobs added to the economy. Last Friday, we actually saw the April numbers, which were not as robust as the previous 3 months. The previous 3 months unemployment picture showed new jobs added to the market more than what the market was expecting. However, in April, what we saw was 175,000 new jobs added to the economy, where the market was expecting 240,000. Okay? Though we've seen a little bit of an uptick in recent new job numbers, what this is showing is that we are starting to see some signs of moderation in the overall labor market. What we do see right now is the unemployment rate picked up across the country to 3.9%. In areas of the country, we're already starting to see a little bit of a divergence in the unemployment rate. California, unfortunately, is leading that right now, where California has 5.3% unemployment, which is up 0.8% on a year-over-year basis. In Ventura County, it's actually at 4.6%, and that's up about 0.5% on a year-over-year basis. Overall, what we see from the labor picture is starting to trend or moderate downward a little bit from the highs that we've seen over the past couple months. And again, that's one of the metrics that the Fed is going to look at as to when they make those decisions about how many rate cuts we could see in 2023. So that's very important from the labor picture. The other area that the Fed looks at specifically are pricing changes. I'm sure we're all familiar with the rises we saw over the past couple years. But as you can see here by this chart, with the consumer price index, prices have been coming down and subsiding from those highs that we saw over the past couple years. However, recently, there's been a little bit of an uptick in the overall CPI and PCE numbers, where in March, they came in higher than expected by about 0.4% on a month-over-month basis, and up about 3.5% for baseline CPI, and its core CPI up 3.8%. A lot of those costs are due to shelter costs, as well as energy costs that we've seen. The Fed's target, though, is core PCE, and core PCE came in at 2.8%. The Fed's goal is having core PCE at 2%. So we're still far away from that metric. It is trending downwards, but it's one of the areas that the Fed is going to continue to monitor. And the Fed has also given us the indication that we're going to not reach that core 2% PCE number until 2026. One area is that we've seen why some of the prices continue and have maintained a little bit of an uptick over the past couple months is because the consumer has been resilient. What we've seen from the recent PCE numbers is that personal spending was up, surprisingly, 0.7%. And why we look at the consumer is because 70% of our GDP comes from consumption. Now, there was an expectation that we would see a little of a downturn in the consumer behavior due to the tightening that we saw from the Fed over the past couple years, especially as prices increased. The past couple months, though, have actually been against that, where we saw in retail sales for March up 0.7%, as well as a sizable revision for February, up 0.9%. A lot of those, especially what we saw from the activity, was due to transportation and spring break activity. But there is that expectation that we're going to start seeing a decline in consumer behavior, mostly due to the headwinds that we're seeing with regards to the fact that the savings rate that was built up during the pandemic has depleted. Credit card levels are at their all-time highs, above $1 trillion. And overall, there's that expectation that the consumer is actually going to have that downward trend for consumption as we move into the rest of 2024. You see that as well with consumer confidence. Though it did have an uptick in February, actually came back down in March, and a lot of that's due to the change in the belief and the overall view of the labor market. Leading economic indicators, as we can see here, leading economic from the LAI, what we did have in the month of March, it actually dropped 0.3%, coming off of a high in February, where it was the first time we saw positive LEI numbers in 2 years, okay? Though these LEI numbers have been down and be declining for the past 2 years, that's not indicative of an upcoming recession. In fact, the board actually came out and said that they do not believe we will see a recession in 2024. And what these leading economic indicators are showing is that generally we're going to see below trend growth. And we see that relative to the expectations for GDP for 2024, coming in just above 2 to about 2.2% for the entire year. One of the bigger areas that drive the leading economic indicators is housing. And I'm sure we're all aware of the challenges that we've seen in the housing market. For the month of March, you actually saw that housing starts for multifamily and single-family homes decline significantly. And those are definitely attributed to that 30-year mortgage rate that's being above 7%. What we saw is, even though there are some challenges from a housing starts, the Case-Shiller 20-City Composite Home Price Index increased by about 6% on a year-over-year basis. So due to the fact that we do see continued tight inventories as well as high mortgage rates, it's definitely handcuffing, in a sense, the buyers and the sellers. And the fact that we do have less inventory is definitely an impact. What we do look at is that 30-year mortgage rate. Once it drops below 7%, as it did a couple months ago, we did see some positive sales numbers, but I feel like that 7% is a Mendoza line for the overall housing market. Right now, that 30-year mortgage rate is about 7.3%. Locally for housing, we actually put some data together, and as you can see here, what we look at is an average single-family home in California. I do apologize, there is a misprint. It's actually not 8.1 million for a single-family home in California. It's 862,000 for a single-family home in California right now, which is up about 10% on a year-over-year basis. In the city of Camarillo, what we see is the single-family home is about 875,000, which on a year-over-year basis is up 22%. And in Ventura County, we can see it's 870,000, that's up 10%. Overall, as I mentioned before, when we look at the economy moving forward for the rest of this year, labor market, there is expectation for the the, in a sense, moderation of the labor market, the challenges that are going to continue on the consumer due to the high prices that we've seen. And we do have that expectation that the Fed is going to have their first rate cut during the summer, either at their June, July, or September meeting. And then we do expect another rate cut from the Fed later in the year as well. But again, those two questions of the timing and the magnitude of the first rate cuts are going to continue to dominate the market as we move through the rest of this year. And with that, I'd like to open it up to some questions.
Questions from council members? Councilmember Martinez Bravo.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much for your presentation. And I know we had a sneak peek with Councilmember Tennyson as we sit in the Finance and Investment Committee as well. I really appreciate looking at the different variables and as they compare locally. So you mentioned the unemployment rate in California is about 5.3% versus 4.6% in Ventura County. I think it's really important for me to understand what is happening here locally as well, as there are some specific variables that are impacting our county specifically. I know that Ventura County, for example, is the least affordable county in the United States, and that is of concern to me. Would you also be able to speak as to some of those differences locally versus state and national when we're talking about consumer resiliency and other factors, or are they trending pretty much along the same lines?
I don't have those data points specifically for kind of consumer behavior locally. It's generally what we're seeing from demographics around the country. But what I will say is it's interesting when we compare the behavior of the consumer this year to, I would say, last year in the third quarter. And you're starting to see some areas, specifically concert attendance. So and one of the things that drove a strong GDP number in Q3 of 2023 was the Taylor Swift, Beyonce trends that we saw. I only mention that because recently Coachella was not sold out. And so you're starting to see some levels of pricing pressures definitely hit individuals. I wasn't planning, but one of the trends I personally like to look at is attendance in Major League Baseball games, which is actually starting to decline nationally as well, and even locally. The Dodgers actually have a significant decline, and if I remember correctly, it's around 1,700 fans per game comparatively to last year. I attribute that to the fact that they also have the highest season ticket prices as well of any team in Major League Baseball. So there's some specific areas that we're seeing, as well as you're starting to see trends. I would talk about specifically Starbucks report last week, where Starbucks came out and actually saw that their same-store sales had declined significantly. And that's due to the fact that the consumers are actually reevaluating how many times they decide to visit a Starbucks. And why that's important is because there's an expectation from the consumer as we continue to move through 2024 that there's going to be a reevaluation of where they actually spend money. Not so much going after large ticket items, looking for sales. They show an expectation from Costco to continue to improve from some of their numbers, but there's going to be a discerning trend by the consumer, and you've seen it, with Starbucks, and I also kind of attribute it to baseball games as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Other questions? Vice Mayor Kildee?
Yeah, thanks for being here. I always look forward to the report. But as far as the housing challenges, obviously not all of it, but a lot of it comes into the mortgage rate, and the 30 years over 7% in some ways. So what is the Fed going to look at? What will constitute the Fed for really being serious about cutting the interest rate? What are they going to look like that's going to be able to allow them to do it? Because I believe you said the market is expecting, I believe you said perhaps 2 rate cuts. And if that's the case, how much do they typically cut per session? And I know this is just forecasting, I get that. But how much can we expect, or I don't want to say expect, but is there a barometer about how much that they will be able to cut given all the factors, the employment, the growth of consumer spending? I know they have to take a lot of factors in that, but with all that, A, when can we perhaps expect that? I think you may have already answered it. And B, how are they going to come up with the formula that's going to allow them to do that?
So that's a great question, and I would start off with saying that the Fed has been given two mandates by Congress. And first, that is full employment and stable prices. That's it. Okay, that's what their metrics are for looking at right now. And one of the reasons why we saw them increase the federal funds rate significantly over the past couple of years was to curtail the runaway inflation that we had seen, okay, to bring that back in line. At the beginning of this year, the Fed gave the market through their dot plot, okay, and also recently at their meeting in April, that we're going to see 3 rate cuts in 2024. Since then, there has been some forward guidance by Fed members due to inflation being a little bit higher than what they've expected, that they could pull those numbers back, okay, not having as many as 3. Now, one of the reasons why we believe the Fed will actually have their first rate cut this summer is because there are certain factors of the labor market that are starting to show a little bit of moderation and deterioration, and those that I did not cover here, okay? Those being wage inflation has continued to decline. Quit rates have also declined as well. So in a sense, we're not seeing people move jobs as much. So therefore, when people aren't moving jobs, there's the pricing pressure that exists from a wage perspective doesn't increase, okay? And due to those factors of the expectation of a deteriorating labor force, we expect the Fed to actually initiate their first rate cut during the summer because they don't want to continue to wait to have that first rate cut, and potentially due to some inflation numbers that we might see towards the end of the year might make it harder for them to do so, okay? So there is an initial point right now as we move through the summer that we could see that initial cut from the Fed, and that's what we're expecting. Now, the market actually at the beginning of this year priced in 7 rate cuts from the Fed, okay? Because there was the expectation that due to the tightening by the Fed that the consumer would not have this resiliency that we've seen over the past couple months. But since then, the market has actually come back in line, and right now the market is actually pricing for 1 rate cut between now and the end of the year, okay? So I think this year, and as we continue to move through the year, that old adage of don't fight the Fed is being realized by the market. And I think the Fed, and as we look at it, the metrics related to an expectation that inflation is going to moderate, okay, and the labor market is going to start showing some deterioration as we move into the second half of the year, is what's going to give the Fed the impetus to have that first rate cut. Now, every time there is that expectation that the rate cut or the levels of rate cut will actually be at 25 basis points, so when the Fed meets. So they're meeting in June, July, and September. At any of those meetings, the labor market returns that we actually showed for new jobs that just came in for the month of April actually is a good report to allow the Fed to potentially cut rates during the summer. So if we see that report continue to, the labor market continue to go downwards, some of that momentum, and prices continue to moderate, that'll give that Fed that 25 basis point impetus. We do not believe that they will cut rates by 50 basis points. So that level that we'll see at those meetings will be at a 25 basis point level.
Just have one other question. I monopolize the time, but just because you're here, you only come here, you know, it's hard to get you up here, and I understand that. But just 2 real quick questions. Mm-hmm. Has all the stimulus money pretty much been filtered through the economy? And the fact that it's an election year, does that make any bearing on whether or not the Fed will consider an interest rate adjustment? So I'll answer the second question first. The Fed has continually said they are agnostic to politics and to an election year. There has been history where they actually have made rate cuts or rate hikes during an election year. But there's so that's one of the areas that they continue to say and will not be pressured, in a sense, due to the fact that it's an election year. The economic data is what is going to impact their decision. For your first question related to the stimulus, for the most part, the majority of the stimulus has been pushed through for individuals. There are still some public agencies and cities that we do know that still have some part of the stimulus to actually continue to spend through. But overall, the stimulus that we saw during COVID has mostly been, we've already seen the impacts from those. Thank you.
Hmm?
If I could just clarify one thing. Chris mentioned 25 basis points. Just for clarification, that equates to about 1/4%.
Any other questions, comments? And I think that completes your report this evening, right, Chris?
Yes, sir.
So, first of all, thank you very much for being here. We really appreciate your time. I think I would be remiss if I didn't say, for the benefit of those who are in the audience, that this city is in a very strong financial position. All you have to do is to go to the city's website and look at our balance sheet, our general fund balance sheet, our investment reports, what the city has done, and what prior city councils and prior city managers have done to put us in this position. But in no small part, trying to maintain that comes through the efforts of Chandler, comes through the efforts of our finance department, the members of our finance and investment committees, and thank you, and we have public members of the finance and investment committees. But I want to make sure that people know that they can go directly to our website, because it's very transparent on there, and look at the position that this city is in. And this city is the envy of many other municipalities in our region in terms of its strength. And so I want to thank you for being here this evening. I appreciate your time. And this is a receive and file item, so we'll consider it received and filed. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council members.
Okay, so we're 9 minutes from 6 o'clock, and at 6 o'clock I need to call for public comments on items that are not on the agenda. So since we're within striking distance of 6 o'clock, I'm going to declare, with everybody, without objection, a short recess. We will reconvene at 6 o'clock, and I mean it, 6 o'clock, hear any public comments on items not on the agenda, and then move to our final item N on transit operation and maintenance services. All right? All right, with that, we're in recess. All right, it's now 6 o'clock, and for the record will indicate that all council members, including Councilmember Tennyson, are back at their seats by 6 o'clock. And this is the time for public comments on items that are not on tonight's agenda. And I believe we have 2 public comments. Just so our speakers know, and this will also apply to item N, all of our speakers have 3 minutes to speak to the council. I have to keep it at 3 minutes. I think we have a timer going on that, Madam Clerk, so somebody can see the time that's going by, because we want to make sure that everyone is treated equally. So we don't allow our speakers to yield time to one another. Each person speaks for themselves, and we'll take it from there. All right, so I have 2 speaker cards for items that are not on the agenda tonight, and the first speaker card is for David Mormon. Mr. Mormon, welcome aboard. Please come up.
Hi, how are you?
Great, how are you?
Not too bad for an old guy. The reason I'm addressing the city council today is I'm addressing the city council regarding your recently passed ordinance regarding oversized vehicles. As simple as this. Item D, requirements of oversized vehicle handicap permit. If you don't know by now, I have a service animal. I do have a handicap. I've had multiple sclerosis for 9 years now. So, as a matter of fact, one of my former employers is in the audience. So he can, if you have to ask him any questions, he can attest to the fact that I did a really good job for him while I was handicapped with him. But my rub is with the section D, where it says any bona fide city resident, bona fide meaning of faith. So I'm a city resident by faith, faith in the fact that I say I'm a city resident. Of course, having a mailing address helps as well. May obtain an oversized vehicle handicap permit if such person would be entitled to receive a handicap placard or license plate under California Vehicle Code, and if the oversized vehicle is the only, and this is where I have the rub, because I've, ever since I've been in Camarillo, as a homeless guy, I've had a vehicle. I've had a car. As a matter of fact, I just bought a car. I can't help the fact that I have a 780 credit score. All right? The thing is that bothers me is that the vehicle that I had previously had a salvage title to it because it was rear-ended on Loma Drive when I lived on Loma Drive. The point is I gave that vehicle to the homeless guy behind me. And so you're telling me I can't have 2 vehicles. Am I supposed to drive my RV around town to go to my doctor's appointments, to my vet appointments, those type of things? Did you intend for people to park their RVs in Ralph's parking lot, or Target's parking lot, or Home Depot's parking lot? Well, if I'm entitled to a handicap permit, what difference does it make that I have more than 1 vehicle? Seriously. And you people need to answer that question for yourselves. Are you trying to restrict me from being able to go to Woodland Hills for my physical therapy sessions or whatever?
Mr. Mormon, thank you very much for being here tonight.
Yeah, well, wish you would reconsider and make it possible for me to get a permit so I can park my oversized vehicle. I'm not a nuisance to anybody in the city.
I understand.
This man will testify of that.
Thank you for your comments this evening. It's not on the agenda, so we can't unfortunately discuss it. Thank you for being here. All right, our second speaker is Bob Garcia.
Thank you for letting me speak tonight. As you know, I've been before the board before about renaming Constitution Park to Veterans Memorial Park. I have some updated information. I provided you guys with some packets. I'm going to quickly go over these three little statements about 3 of the 36 Camarillo residents who were been killed in the service of our country. Major Dawson was taken as a prisoner of war in the Philippines. He was killed when American forces attacked a Japanese transport ship, unknowing that it was filled with American POWs. He was lost off of Formosa, now called Taiwan. Lieutenant Stuart Doty was a naval aviator. He served in the Atlantic, participated in the sinking of 3 German U-boats, was transferred to the Pacific, and was lost over a raid over Tokyo. Neither Major Dawson or Lieutenant Doty's body was ever recovered. Lieutenant Doty's plane was observed crashing into the ocean, the Pacific Ocean. I've spoken about Airman Victor Corona in the past. He's been missing for 74 years now, missing over after completing a mission in North Korea. All of these guys lived in Camarillo, along with the 33 others. Camarillo, or the Camarillo area, that includes Somas, and back then, when Camarillo wasn't incorporated, the Heights and areas like that. I also provided you with a list of the 36 names, and then if you look in that packet, I have to apologize for the quality of these photos, but I go through the microfiche at the library here, and I have to take pictures of the articles that were in the Camarillo News at that time, showing how traumatic these things were in a small town at that time, like 3,000 some people in this area. I also wanted to mention that I have contacted 5 of the original donors. I know there was some concern that some of the people who donated to upgrade the park and name it Constitution Park might not want to have that name changed. I've contacted Agland, E.J. Harrison, the Meadowlark Service League, Spanish Hills Country Club, and Griffin Landscape, and none of them responded to me. I sent them the flyer. I've been there in person. I've emailed them. I've talked to them on the phone, and I get no response. That, to me, means that it's not an issue. I mean, they're not, if they were really concerned about it, I would think they would respond. Maybe, you know, it's just because it's, you know, a citizen. Maybe if somebody from the city called them, they might get a response. But E.J. Harrison I talked to 3 times and gave him the flyer, and I haven't got a word one way or another that they're opposed or for it. So I've been consistently going out, trying to get, drum up support. I get nothing but positive feedback, and I hope they're emailing. They say they do, but I don't know if they do or not.
First of all, Mr. Garcia, thank you for your comments this evening. Thank you for your service. I know that, and this is not on the agenda tonight, so unfortunately we can't discuss it, but I know that both Councilmember Santangelo and myself, we've had an extensive discussion on this in a policy committee meeting that you were a part of. And I think I'm still waiting for the follow-up from items from the discussion in the policy committee. So I would look forward to refer this to staff and hope that something will be coming back to policy committee pretty soon. That was my recollection, Councilmember Santangelo. Is that yours as well? Okay.
That was my recollection.
Right,
as well.
and so hopefully we'll hear something. We'll be able to reconvene on policy committee again in the near future to discuss this further, then come back to council. So thank you for your presentation.
Okay. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you. All right. Are there any other members of the public who wish to address the council on an item not on the agenda? Mr. Sandlin.
Honorable Mayor and honorable council members, it's an honor to speak with you guys tonight. I wanted to give you an update on a project that my family and I have been working on since 2008. Actually started in this very room that we're sitting in right here when the city put on a development workshop for the Dawson Drive development program that we had when we had the redevelopment funds were in place before those were taken away by the state. This last week, and this has been a priority for the council for the last 30 plus years, I think. This last week, I'm not sure if you noticed, but the only billboard that was in the city of Camarillo was taken down. We finally got the billboard down right there on Dawson Drive, And we've been doing urban renewal, been working on it. We're doing some demolition. We're developing. We have a food truck lot and commissary that's on Dawson Drive that's right next to where that billboard was. And next to that, we're going to be developing a food truck commissary, and we're expanding the food truck commissary, and we are building a mini storage on the top 2 floors. It's a beautiful building. It's going to be very expensive. Hope costs keep coming down, like the gentleman said, so we can really make something special and nice in Camarillo. I remember as a kid when I used to go work for my dad when he started his transportation company with just one van. I would walk from, used to be Los Altos, all the way to Constitution, but I'd have to walk down Dawson Drive. And I remember how blight it was. And we ended up finally being able to do something about that. We started this project in 2008, and we are now breaking ground. So it took a while, but just wanted to bring that update to the council and let you know there's no more billboards in the city of Camarillo. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sandlin. I actually did notice that because our automobile services shop that my wife takes her car to, we were there just last week, and it's also by our veterinary our veterinary's office. So thank you very much. All right. Are there any other members of the public who wish to address the council on a non-agenda item? All right. Moving on. We're going to go now to item N, which is Transit Operation and Maintenance Services and Award of Agreement. And I believe we're going to have a staff presentation first, right, Mr. Cruz?
Correct.
All right, great. And then after you do your presentation, then I would call on members of the public at that point. After you do your presentation and members of the council have any questions for you. Thank you.
Right. Good evening, Mayor Tremblay and council members. Sean Cruz, Public Works Administrator. Tonight I'll be providing a brief presentation on the recommendation to award an agreement to RTW Management Incorporated for transit operations and maintenance services. With me tonight is Lydia Salas, Management Assistant, who I do want to recognize for her work on putting together the RFP, the staff report, and tonight's presentation as well. For some general background information, the city's transit program, Camarillo Area Transit, is currently operated by RATP USA, doing business as Roadrunner Shuttle. We have 2 fixed routes. Currently, one called the fixed route, which includes service to and from Leisure Village and other areas of the city, such as Pleasant Valley Hospital, Camarillo Library, the Community Center, Post Office, and a few shopping centers. Our other fixed route is the trolley route, which starts and ends at the Metrolink station and provides service along the 101 business corridor. We also have our demand response service, or dial-a-ride services, which include our local general dial-a-ride, which provides origin to destination services to the general public, as well as passengers with an ADA card and seniors 65 and older. We also provide regional services for dial-a-ride passengers with an ADA card and seniors, with service to Thousand Oaks, Moore Park, and Simi Valley, as well as transfer service to Gold Coast Transit in Oxnard. For historical information on our current agreement for service, City Council approved RATP's agreement on March 11th, 2020, which became effective April 1st of 2020. I'll note that while this was the most current agreement, the city had a prior agreement with RATP and Roadrunner Shuttle before it was acquired by RATP. The 2020 agreement's first year was $67.65 per revenue hour. And as a reminder, a revenue hour is the time that a transit vehicle is available for the public's use and is the time period that the city is billed for. RATP's agreement was for 3 years with 7 optional 1-year renewal terms, or a variation of that extension. Of course, as everyone recalls, March and April of 2020, just as the full impact of COVID-19 was beginning to be felt, and like many services, public transit was severely reduced. On May 13th of 2020, RATP requested COVID-19 relief due to significant lost revenue. Several amendments were approved by City Council in 2020 and 2021, enabling RATP to recover eligible expenses above the reduced billable revenue and ultimately establishing a tiered rate structure which adjusted the revenue hour rate depending on how many revenue hours of service are provided in a month compared to pre-COVID revenue hours provided for each month. On March 8th of 2023, the city executed its fifth amendment with RATP and the first one-year extension, which included proposed rate increases as well as increased insurance requirements from the city and an extension of the renewal term from 12 months to 15 months to coincide with the city's fiscal year. Oh, sorry, I'm going too far ahead here. In July of 2023, staff reached out to RATP staff about looking at alternatives to the tiered rate structure that might provide more fiscal security to both parties. We looked at different ideas and asked about the ability of doing pass-through costs to help reduce uncertainty of expected expenditures, such as vehicle parts, given the age of some of our fleet vehicles, and noted that the city was looking to procure a scheduling software program for dial-a-ride services that would be provided for use. Staff at RATP provided a suggestion of looking at a fixed and variable rate structure, which would include a flat monthly cost intended to cover much of their fixed cost, such as building leases, insurance, etc., and a revenue hour rate that would be charged against the number of revenue hours of service provided each month. This is similar to a rate structure that RATP has with VCTC for operations of their intercity bus routes and the city of Santa Maria, and is also similar to VCTC's contract with MV Transportation for the Valley Express service. We asked RATP to provide 3 pricing scenarios: the fixed variable rate with maintenance parts pass-through, a single revenue hour rate with maintenance parts pass-through, and a status quo tiered rate structure, which they provided on December 8th. This slide provides some details about the 3 scenarios proposed by RATP. I want to highlight that the CAT hourly rates are a calculated equivalent hourly rate based on specific criteria, such as an estimated number of revenue hours or estimated expenditures. After receiving RATP's proposed pricing scenarios, staff compared the rates to neighboring agency rates. Now, every transit agency is different, and it does make it hard to establish an apples-to-apples comparison as shown in this table. For example, Gold Coast dial-a-ride service has a lower revenue hour rate, but they also have several incentive-based payments if certain performance measures are achieved, meaning that they can earn more than just the revenue hour rate. Or if you compare that to Moorpark's dial-a-ride rate that encompasses all costs, including fuel, as well as the vehicles that are provided by their operator. The closest comparison that we have is that the VCTC Valley Express service, closest that we have a comparison is the VCTC Valley Express service, because they operate a similar transit service to Camarillo's, which is that they operate both fixed route and dial-a-ride services. They have a similar number of vehicles. At last count, they had about 15 vehicles. We have 18. And they also have a fixed and variable rate with fuel as an additional pass-through, though the cost of parts is included in their rates. What staff found in general was that it appeared that Camarillo's rates were among the highest of the transit agency rates in Ventura County. Given the comparison, staff informed RATP that we determined we needed to perform an RFP to see what the current market cost might be for providing transit services here in Camarillo. On January 4th of this year, the city released an RFP posting on our Planet Bids portal. We included a mandatory pre-proposal meeting that was held via Zoom on January 18th. And for the RFP itself, we asked for pricing based on the fixed and variable rate scenario with fuel and parts pass-through. Staff received notification from RATP on January 31st that they were declining to submit a proposal as they had already provided proposed pricing for fiscal year 24-25. Upon receiving the notification, we reached out to VCTC as they're our federal transit administrator, or federal funding administrator, and we wanted to make sure that RATP hadn't inadvertently removed themselves from being able to continue with the city. VCTC confirmed that the city would still have the option to extend its agreement as we have a current agreement and have renewal options. And on February 27th, the city received 2 responsive proposals from RTW Management Incorporated and Ventura Transit Services. The city used a 5-person panel consisting of 3 City of Camarillo employees and 2 staff from other transit agencies, specifically the City of Thousand Oaks and the Ventura County Transportation Commission. Their evaluation consisted of a review of the respective bidder's proposal as well as interviews. This slide provides an average of the panelists' scores specific to the interview, with RTW averaging a 90-point score and VTS averaging a 78-point score. The panelists noted that RTW demonstrated a greater understanding of federal requirements and provided more details about how they track and collect data. While price was considered as part of the score comparison between RTW and VTS, this is not a low-cost bid, and cost is not the sole determination of selection of a service provider. Now, speaking of cost, the table here provides price comparison between RTW, VTS, and RATP using an assumed 21,000 revenue hours of service and excluding gas and parts pass-through. RATP's fiscal year 24-25 cost would be estimated at $2.8 million, RTW at $2.4 million, and VTS coming in at under $2.1 million. As part of the RFP evaluation process, the 5 panelists scored and selected which proposer they recommended, RTW or VTS. The panelists all selected RTW. With that determination, I then asked the panelists if, based on what they had reviewed and were presented with, if they were recommended selecting RTW or if they recommended establishing an amendment with RATP. The panelists unanimously recommended selecting RTW. Staff performed additional review of RTW's proposal, including reviewing references and previous transit operations provided by RTW, and concluded to concur with the panelists' recommendation. The RFP included pricing for the next 4 years of service. This table provides estimated annual cost for the 4 years of service based off of RTW's fixed and variable rates, the estimated number of revenue hours for each year, as well as estimated fuel cost and repair cost, or repair parts. The total proposed not to exceed amount for the 4-year term is $11,866,219. So what are the next steps? If City Council approves awarding to RTW upon execution of the agreement, many items will need to take place. RTW will begin the process of interviewing our RATP employees for multiple positions, such as drivers, dispatchers, route supervisors, mechanics, etc. RTW will also need to finalize their lease agreement for their storage and maintenance shop. That's our understanding that they're interested in assuming the lease of the current Roadrunner facility if there's interest in their part to do that. If that does not work out, RTW has another facility that has a lease agreement that they are working on finalizing or re-examining to do that. They also have another facility potentially as a third alternative. Now, speaking of the Thousand Oaks facility, although it is in Thousand Oaks, it does have the benefit of a site that the city's vehicles will be stored and maintained inside the facility as opposed to outdoors. The city's vehicles will need to be transferred to from RATP to RTW, as well as dial-a-ride passenger profiles and any trips that may be scheduled for when service starts on July 1st. It needs to be acknowledged that this will be a complex process, especially when you consider that Camarillo Area Transit operates 7 days a week. Service will be provided by RATP through Sunday, June 30th of 2024, and on Monday morning, July 1st, RTW will begin operations. With that, the recommendations are to find the agreement for transit operations and maintenance services exempt from review under the California Environmental Quality Act pursuant to Section 15061B3 and 15301 of the CEQA guidelines, and authorize the city manager to execute agreement number 2024-28 with RTW Management Incorporated for transit operations and maintenance services for a 4-year term for an amount not to exceed $11,866,219. This concludes my report. I'm happy to answer questions that council may have or when we get to that time. And I will note that George Goetz, president of RTW, is in the audience if council members have direct questions for him. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I think I'm sure that council members have a lot of questions for you. Who would like to begin? Vice Mayor Kildee.
Yeah. Okay, so, well, before I start, I had a conversation with our city attorney. I do have a business that does have a trolley stop, but it was considered and determined that I am able to take place in this conversation. Is that correct, Counselor?
That's correct. You can participate. Thank you.
Thank you. Is it fair to say that transit is subsidized in our city?
Yes.
In other words, the amount of money that we get to provide the service does not necessarily cover that service without some other influx of money.
Correct, yes. Transit for Camarillo is subsidized. We have transit funding, either TDA, STA, FTA funding, as well as the fares. And that's not uncommon of many public transit agencies, especially here in Ventura County.
And how much money, do you have a figure about how much money the difference between those two amounts were last year?
I'm sorry, of which particular breakdown?
In the breakdown of the amount of money that we got in grants from federal and state, any monies that we got to provide the service vis-a-vis what the cost of that service was and the difference between that?
I don't have off the top of my head the difference. I can say that we do receive enough, currently we're receiving FTA, TDA, STA, and SGR revenues that do cover the cost of our transit program, along with I think if you looked at it from a hard number, about 2 or 3% of our transit operational costs are covered by fares. It might be a little bit, we are seeing a little bit of increase in ridership, so it may have gone up. But we are not using any general fund monies or other non-transit related funds to cover our transit expenditures.
Okay, and that's kind of been the situation for several years now.
Yes, I'll note that the beginning in fiscal year 22-23, correct me if I'm wrong, yes, is the first year that we started to use TDA money as opposed to the general fund. We've always had the federal funding and some of the STA and SGR, but 22-23 is the first fiscal year that we began to utilize our TDA money on transit.
Okay. And another question, I can ask this later, but how do we know that the prospective business has the wherewithal to be able to A, fund the contract, B, provide the necessary service of this contract, and C, the flexibility to change the contract if in fact there's some significant changes that those of us have experienced in, dealing with the transit here?
Correct. So in general, we've had several conversations with them. I will say, we did not perform like a fiscal audit or anything of that nature in the sense of, going through all of their books. They are aware of our transit our requirements as far as the level of service and the types of service that are required. And they've still persevered to want to take on the requirements. With regards to the flexibility or the potential cost, that was, especially both with them and as well as in talking with RATP, the idea of the fixed and variable cost is meant to provide some cushion for any transit operator from being able to have like their fixed costs covered if our revenue hour demands increase or decrease significantly. I'll note that, there is always the possibility that for any contract or any transit operator that if we saw to the point of revenue hours going above perhaps like 25% or more or below, there's always going to be the potential for any contractor to come in and say, look, we had some assumptions of fixed costs versus variable, but we could see, like with any transit operator, a potential to come back with requests. But we've, specifically for this contract, we were designing it to be a little bit more absorbent of fluctuations of the number of revenue hour services that we may see.
I'm not aware of any, perhaps you can educate me. Are there any local transit that they are providing now? Is there any references that you can share with me tonight that they've got?
So locally, no. They have not provided services in Ventura County, and this would be the first contract that they would have in place in the state of California if it is approved. They do provide services in other cities or in other states that we did some reference checks on, and of course I'm now going to go blank on those cities, but there was one in particular for in Arizona, another one in Virginia, and then, sorry, which one? Maryland, as well as a couple of others, where they've had both dial-a-ride and fixed route services. And as far as the reference checks, they did come positive with regards to either the start of a brand new service that hadn't existed before, or transitioning from a contractor who was providing the service, and then they assumed the service.
And my last question, did the city have an off-ramp if something does not go as expected with this contract?
So we would have to explore a few different options, whether it be, depending upon when an off-ramp were to be needed, as far as either seeing if either the current contractor is still amenable to taking on the service. We do have pricing from the other, from VTS. There's always the possibility of working working cooperative efforts with our neighboring transit agencies for services. But I'll mention too, like we did note that with RTW that the pricing that is proposed is the pricing, and that it will not be, we're not looking at increasing it should they run into difficulties. That it is, as is in the contract, they would essentially have to do the 160-day notice of termination before being able to exit the contract once the service is up and running.
Okay. Just a quick comment. I asked that question because I've been here long enough to where that has been an issue, and it has had been dealt with too.
I think next up is Councilmember Santangelo.
Thank you for your presentation. During it, you mentioned that the panel, after it compared RTW and Ventura, then compared it with RATP, and still felt that RTW was the better choice. Can you explain why?
So, in general, it was, they looked at I think for them, they were looking at the cost as part of the factor, and some of the items that they highlighted within their proposal, as far as their data collection and anything else particular, and the technology with regards to like the vehicle tracking and everything that they were proposing to come in. But it was like we brought up that table, and I asked about like the difference of cost, and is that enough to warrant wanting to change contractors?
Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
Councilmember Tennyson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Has the city been unhappy with the services provided by RATP?
I think for the service size that it is, they are providing good service. We get, I mean, just like any transit agency, you do get complaints from passengers, but that's not uncommon among the other, with any type of transit program.
So was the purpose of an RFP merely driven by the cost associated with the transit services?
Yes, yeah, it was predominantly, we really looked at, what it was is we were looking at, again, every transit agency is different. We all have our different quirks or different requirements or caveats. But we were looking and concerned with the fact that our service countywide was much more expensive than what our neighboring agencies were paying. So a part of the RFP was to see what was even potentially out there. And so then with what we received, the panel selected to attempt to recommend another contractor.
The staff report indicated it was difficult to get an apples-to-apples comparison.
Yes.
And so, since it's difficult to get an apples-to-apples comparison, how do we know we're getting a more reliable and cost-effective service with RTW than we are with RATP?
So that we're looking at just for one part, the comparison between the pricing that we have between the three contractors. You are correct that because of every apples-to-apples, or there are no real apples-to-apples comparison. So as far as other caveats or carve-outs, it really is difficult to be able to say which of the cities is getting like the best bang for the buck per se. I think again the best comparison we have is the Valley Express service, which is, compared to some of the other transit agencies, also more expensive than what you see from like Gold Coast or Moore Park or Thousand Oaks, or the Thousand Oaks Intercity. We get closer to their hourly rate. But even with the VTS comparison, or I'm sorry, with the Valley Express comparison, we were still high enough to be of concern that we wanted to look at other options.
California is a very unique state.
Yes.
And is it troublesome at all that this is a company that does not have a footprint in California and hasn't dealt with the regulations and requirements in California versus RATP, which has been here for a while?
Correct. It was an item of discussion. We have, again, as I mentioned, we've talked to RTW several times about like if they're certain that they have the ability to come in and assume a new service. I mean, I will recognize that most transit agencies were a small transit agency at some point and didn't have to gain experience somewhere, and this would be a fairly big foothold or experience in California. They have had they have provided a service for, I believe it's for a Veterans Affairs agency down in Southern California that they're no longer operating, but they've had a prior presence in California, but just none currently.
And do we know why that prior presence has disappeared?
Yeah. Our understanding from that, having talked with RTW, is that RTW was a subcontractor, and I may punt to them also depending upon if I get this wrong, but they were a subcontractor for another contractor that had the contract. That contractor went bankrupt and had stopped paying RTW, and after some time of going back and forth with that contractor, RTW felt like they needed to pull out because they were no longer being compensated for the service that they were providing.
Do you consider it problematic that RTW doesn't currently have a secure parking facility for the city's transit vehicles in Camarillo, and if they have to do it in Thousand Oaks, the amount of wear and tear going up the canal grade, the additional miles on the vehicles, increased maintenance costs as a result of that?
That was a consideration, yes. One of again, as part of an RFP process, and we do recognize that there is, in order for to receive potential proposals or open it up to contractors, that there are going to be instances where contractors may come in and not have a specific site ready to go because it is a large investment to have. And so we do have it open as an option of a site being identified but not yet fully acquired at this time.
And if they don't acquire a site in Camarillo, will that be a problem with the contract? Will it increase the city's costs?
So our response to RTW is that we are not going to entertain an increase in cost if their sites fall through of what they have selected. So they are going to have to move quickly. If council approves this item, they will have to move quickly to secure a site so that they can come back to us and say, okay, we have the site, we're good to go, we're now working on transitioning.
One last question. Yes. Isn't it accurate, though, if their site is in Thousand Oaks, we will in fact see an increased cost because of the wear and tear of going up the canal grade?
We will likely see there will be some more miles on the vehicle, so that can lead to needing to replace them perhaps more quickly. It'll depend on the number of the vehicles and the number of revenue hours of service that they put in. I will note we did do sort of a back of the napkin cost of like for fuel, looking at an estimated miles per gallon, everything, and I will note that we are probably going to look at about $65,000 of additional fuel cost than currently in place if they do end up with the site in Thousand Oaks. I'll note that the site that they've identified in Thousand Oaks is still within like the 10-mile radius from City Hall. That was included in actually for this RFP, we'd actually expanded it up to 20 miles to see if that helped with potentially other, just to see what that brought in from the list of candidates. But the site in Thousand Oaks is like at 9.5 miles, so it's just under the 10 miles that was in the original RFP from 2020 or 2019 into 2020. So the city in the past has entertained the idea of having a site that is further away from City Hall than what it is currently at, which I will admit, yes, is very close. As we've noted in other staff reports and stuff, is connected to the Metrolink station.
Thank you.
Councilmember Martinez-Bravo.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a clarifying question. And first of all, thank you very much for the presentation. I know there's a lot of history here, and I appreciate the due diligence. So my first question is a clarifying question. So the city reached out to RATP to submit a proposal, and they declined to submit a proposal. And my understanding is because they said they had already submitted their numbers?
Right. So the summer of 2023, we did reach out to them to look at what are potential changes that we could have for going into looking at the option of doing it the next 1-year extension, looking at different costs. What could be done to maybe help stabilize pricing or things of that nature. And so in December, they had provided the pricing proposal of the 3 scenarios that we had requested based upon our discussions with them. And then when we looked at the rates, then determined that, okay, we understand their rates. They are high in Ventura County wide, so we felt like we needed to do the RFP. We let them know that we looked at their rates. We felt like we needed to see what the market was. And then they let us know after, so we had our mandatory pre-proposal meeting, everyone was there, and then that's when they notified us later that they were going to abstain from submitting a proposal based upon the RFP because they had provided pricing that they felt was good for our what would essentially be our 24-25 extension. And so they're within that right to do that. And as I mentioned too in the staff report, our main concern too is that we just wanted to make sure that they hadn't inadvertently, if we'd missed something, federal requirement that was going to prevent us from utilizing them if it turned out that the RFP didn't warrant, good results. That we, because if we, for example, heard something from VCTC that they need to submit a proposal, we would have been in contact with them to say hey, this is an actual risk of, we're going to be prohibited from continuing with them.
Okay, thank you for that. And then for the 5-person panel.
Yes.
What was the background of the 5 individuals?
So Lydia was on the panel. We had a representative from our finance department, and we also had another public works employee who had previous experience working with RATP. And then we also had, from the city of Thousand Oaks, we had one of their transit staff, and as well as VCTC was one of their transit managers. I'm gonna butcher his title. He's like a program manager for VCTC on the transit side and oversees or participates in their intercity and Valley Express contracts.
Okay. And I'm trying to understand the measures because there were different numbers that were given to VTS versus RTW, 80 and 90, respectively. What is the breakdown of those independent variables that were utilized to get to that number? Like, I know that looking at federal funds was one of them. What else was measured?
So I'm going to punt to Lydia Salas on that, as she was on the interview panel.
Okay.
But it was sort of a breakdown of different criteria, so past experience, experience with federal funding, price, and a few other items.
Mythology.
Yes, like the methodology of how they would come in and assume responsibility for the program, and anything else that I'm forgetting.
Yeah, there was maybe like 5 criterias
Okay.
that we looked at for each one.
And sorry, can you go over it again? You said it was federal funding, like
The
effectiveness?
federal regulated knowledge of the federal funding. What else?
I was mentioning, so in the RFP itself, we had provided like a breakdown
Okay.
of the scoring criteria for each of the categories for both because there were 2 breakdowns. There was a evaluation of the proposals that were submitted, and then there was an evaluation based upon the interview of each of the candidates. So 2 separate scoring or scores that were then sort of put together as an average.
Okay. And all five individuals from the panel voted, or not voted, but they selected RTW as the preference of choice.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And then I do have a question about our federal funding. I understand that the city receives approximately $1.7 million annually in FTA funds.
Yes.
So that's a pretty significant amount. Do we receive any other funding, federal funding that it would be needed?
I'm sorry, any additional federal funding? So for the general operations of the service, that we pretty much utilize our FTA apportionment, and so
Okay.
that would be the 1.7 that I'm aware of. We may occasionally get some separate federal grants for for a particular capital procurement, but as far as our ongoing operations, we have our annual FTA 5307 allocation, which at this time covers operations of the service, maintenance of the service or maintenance cost, as well as funding that we're able to set aside to put towards vehicle procurement. All of those, the 5307 money, of course, has local match requirements, which we utilize the TDA money. The past couple of years since we've started to use TDA, we've averaged between $1.3 to $1.6 million of allocating TDA money to the transit program. That would be for both the transit program as well as like some of the costs that we have at the Metrolink station. And so those are the 2 big pots of money that we get or that we utilize annually. And then I mentioned earlier about like STA and SGR money. Those are, in the tens of thousands, or for SGR maybe like $8,000 or $9,000 that we get. But those are predominantly used at this time for capital procurements or to serve as like the local match for a vehicle acquisition or some of the maintenance costs of the Metrolink station, things of that nature.
Okay. And so when measuring the efficiency of having that federal funding knowledge, it's RTW who scored the highest, correct?
Correct, of the 2 between VTS and RTW, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And that has more to do with because we're federally funded, there are obviously requirements that we have to adhere to federally. And our NTD, National Transit Database reporting, collecting certain data that we have to report, things of that nature.
Okay. Thank you. And then I had a similar question to Councilmember Tennyson's, which is the 3 RATP, RTW and VTS. So RTW is not, obviously is not local.
Correct.
RATP is also not local. They're in Texas, but they have done work here, obviously here in California.
Yes, I believe their current corporate location is in Texas, but they do, as you noted, they do have a local presence. They've got the site for that they currently operate our service out of. They have another site that they lease to operate the VCTC intercity service. And they also have services up in the Santa Barbara County, kind of the Santa Ynez area.
Okay.
And they may have others, but those are the three off the top of my head that I'm aware of kind of locally.
And then VTS are they local? Did I read that incorrectly?
They are local.
They are local.
They have a site here in Camarillo.
Okay. In looking at RTW, did staff look at at their history of the quality or any complaints?
So we looked at, well, we checked the references, and for which of course would be expected to have good responses or good information from the people who we checked. But they particularly for the new service that they had over in Arizona, they did very well with implementing the new service. Was the report back. The service in Virginia, where they had recently acquired from another contractor who had, I believe, had the contract for 10 plus years, that RTW assumed that transition went well and had positive results. We had heard about some of the concern about the San Diego location with Veterans Affairs, and I'm going to blank on whether that was Veterans Affairs or which particular veteran agency. But as we understood it, it had more to do with an issue of the prime versus them being the sub, and are in general, Google searches, is just basically attempting to find anything that might come up. So from what we were able to glean, it appeared that they've had some good track record with some of the services that they have provided.
Okay. Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you. So I previously asked staff many questions, and only a few have been addressed by staff in the presentation tonight. So I want to go through my questions. I haven't seen a response yet. So I've got probably over a dozen questions for you, Sean. Let's start from the top. And I'm going to, and for benefit of the council, I'm going to refer to the staff report. On page 2 in the first full paragraph, and I need to bring it all the way back in terms of the structure. What was the rationale for staff's determination that the dual rate structure, as opposed to the other two options, would be the most appropriate?
So at that, so the dual rate provided from our perspective, the dual rate provided the contractor with the ability to ensure cost recovery for fixed cost and maintain a more consistent estimate of expenditures of the city. So that was essentially our assessment.
And so the focus there, the prism there was appropriate in the cost sense, in terms of fixed cost recovery?
So it wasn't necessarily focused on cost, although there is a greater potential for savings with the city's newer fleet requiring less maintenance. So,
okay.
So cost was a consideration, but yes.
But that is fixed cost recovery.
Correct.
Not?
Well, so the fixed costs, yes, but as we also mentioned in here too, the parts of the vehicles will be a pass-through that we included in there.
Okay. So based on that, how would you describe the pros versus the cons of the three different rate structures? In other words, what I'd like you to do is contrast the dual rate structure, right, which is what staff has recommended, and that's a fixed and variable approach, against the single revenue hour rate, versus the tiered revenue hourly rate? Because that latter one, or the last one, is the one that's currently used by RATP, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay, so could you contrast for me the pros and cons of each of those three structures?
So for the pros for the fixed and variable is that we felt that it would help to remove the uncertainty of the cost for the contractor relative to their cost recovery, and given the uncertainty that we're seeing with the revenue hour service demand experience of the past few years. As we've noted too, many transit agencies have been grappling with contractors requesting the higher rates as a result of fewer billable revenue hours. And the single revenue hour rate, as far as comparison, is highly dependent upon the expectation that there are going to be enough revenue hours being in demand to cover the contractor's cost. And then for the tiered revenue hour rate, it's essentially what we're seeing is that it has created a situation where the fewer revenue hours of service that are provided, the service as a whole becomes more expensive. And so while the single revenue hour rate is the simplest and easiest of the options from a budgeting perspective, it also creates the highest risk for the contractor. Could result in, or our concern was that would result in essentially contractors coming in with just a very high revenue hour rate because they've got to assume perhaps the worst with regards to how much it might actually cost to maintain the vehicles, or what if revenue hours dip below a certain percentage.
Okay, so staying with this line of questions, then is it fair, I guess what I'm drawing is a conclusion that from us utilizing the single revenue hour rate schematic is highly dependent on revenue hours demand, right?
Correct.
And is a reason why that is uncertain is because, particularly in a post-COVID and post-pandemic environment where most public transit agencies are really suffering in terms of recovery of riders, we would be in a less advantageous position utilizing that structure?
Yes, that's my opinion, yes.
Based on current market conditions?
Yeah, based on market.
Yeah, I just want to be sure I knew where we were going with it. All right, and then with respect to the tiered revenue hourly rate, I understand that it's fewer hours provided. I'm sorry, fewer hours provided is less expensive. But from a cost standpoint, that did not pencil out to the city's advantage as opposed to the dual rate structure. Am I understanding that correctly?
Correct, yes.
Okay. On page 2 of the staff report, in the first paragraph, the RFP requested pricing using only the fixed and only the dual rate structure, correct?
Correct.
Yes. We did not utilize the other two structures in
Correct.
The RFP. Okay. And the reason that we didn't do that is for the reasons that you just gave? I mean, was there a determination by staff that we were not going to ask for variable rate for the 3 different rate structures?
Yes, yeah, we determined not to do that. We were, for a few reasons, we were concerned about the complexity of establishing multiple rates or multiple rate structures, given sort of the relatively short time period we had for the RFP to be performed. We knew that contractors in general, just looking at our other transit agencies, were increasing their single revenue hour rate. In some agencies, they were seeing rates of 25% or more.
Right.
And so given the uncertainty of, well, we think we might have X number of revenue hours in the coming fiscal year, we don't know, because it's sort of every time you think you know, there's a change. And then the tiered rate, our concern with the tiered rate was that was established with RATP based on like their pre-COVID experience with the city of Camarillo. They knew the history of what previous revenue hours were. They knew their cost for providing the service relative to what our decreased ridership was. And so we were concerned that other transit operators or contractors wouldn't really be able to accurately estimate or calculate how much they would need for each tier of revenue hours that were provided, because our current tiered structure is, it varies from like 50%, 60%, 70%,
Correct.
80%, and so that we were concerned that if we asked other transit contractors to give us a price, they wouldn't really have as in-depth knowledge or be able to come up with a fair pricing structure.
Well, it'd be oranges versus apples is
Right.
I think.
Yeah.
But I also understand then that it's a function of the complexity within the RFP.
Yes.
Because if you're asking for different rate structure, 3 different proposals based on 3 different rate structures, that can get complicated, right?
Correct.
Be like a public works bid where you've got multiple additive, you've got the baseline bids and then multiple additive bids.
Yes, yeah, we'd basically
for
have
2 different.
3 per. Yeah.
Right, for 2 different portions of a project. in other
Right.
words. Okay. Okay, let me go to a different line of question. On page 3 of the staff report, it talks about relevant experience. So can you describe RTW's relevant experience compared to RATP? Because I'm mindful of the May 1 letter from RATP that we all received.
Yeah, so just a few examples that we have. So RTW provides service for the city of Casa Grande, Arizona. That was the Arizona site that I was mentioning for on-demand service. The Maryland VAMC, which I believe was Veterans Affairs, they have an ADA service that they provide. There's the city of Radford, Virginia, which was the contract that we referenced earlier of where they assumed the role after the previous contractor had 10 years of experience or service. That one was for a 30 bus route system. We did, as we mentioned earlier, we spoke with each of those agencies. They had positive review or positive comments to make about RTW, focusing on the ease of the transition, their excellent service, their effective staffing, and increased performance and ridership. And I think I'll mention, and they have a couple of others, although I'm gonna not have all of the details of, they have a Hinesville, Georgia. They have another dial-a-ride program that they have in service. But yes, they are a smaller transit agency relative to RATP, which has multiple contracts throughout the nation.
Okay. Can we go to the slide that has the comparison costs, and you put it in table 2 of the staff report? Yeah, that's fine.
That's right.
So I'm correct. Am I correct in understanding for the first year for RTW, that's a $2.4 million first year?
Yes.
Amount, and that's not including fuel, correct?
Right. It does not include fuel.
It does not include repair costs, correct?
Correct.
Right. And that's based on the dual approach, correct?
Correct.
And that compares favorably by just under $400,000 compared to the RATP dual approach.
Yes.
Right? So in other words, that's an oranges to oranges comparison there.
Yes.
Okay. Then turning to table 1, I don't know if you have a slide to table 1 on proposal comparisons, but I'd like to spend a couple minutes on that. Do you have a PowerPoint slide on that?
Are you talking about for the scoring?
Yeah.
Or I don't believe we do. I think we just had the summary here of.
All right, so for benefit of the council members, I'm looking at table 1, the proposal comparison, and I want to dive into this a little bit. On table 1, one category under item number 9 is vehicle maintenance. There's a distinction between Ventura Transit Services and RTW Management. For Ventura Transit Services, it's company to furnish computer software. For RTW, it is company to furnish intuitive software. Is the intuitive software to be furnished by RTW or proposed to be furnished by RTW superior in some fashion to the computer software to be furnished by VTS? I don't understand the distinction between the two.
Right. I'm gonna pass that to Lydia
I'm sorry we don't have
Sons.
the PowerPoint slide up, but I've got to look, go to the tables.
So during the presentation, RTW discussed their maintenance software in detail, in great detail. And they talked about their GPS tracking, their camera surveillance system, their predictive maintenance, customizing reporting, operational analytics, maintenance schedules, and several other capabilities of their software, maintenance software in specific.
Okay, but contrast that with VTS.
VTS was not able, didn't talk about their maintenance software.
But the table indicates that they did say that they would furnish computer software.
Yes, but they didn't go into detail what the capabilities were of their maintenance software.
Well-
It was in the RFP.
Okay, so, okay, now you read where I was gonna go with this. Okay, so in the RFP, there are particular requirements for software to be furnished, correct?
Basically, there was no specifics as to just maintenance software was to be provided for the vehicles.
But there were no specifics in the RFP on that?
Correct. Just be able to track the maintenance, be able to make sure there's PMs, but no, no specifics as to what capabilities.
Well, let me try it this way. Would you expect that as an industry standard, the type of software that would be furnished by VTS or RATP or RTW for that matter, would be relatively consistent, would be relatively standardized in terms of tracking the vehicles?
Correct, yes.
Okay, so there's no real discernible difference. I guess what I'm struggling to understand is whether there's a discernible difference between the software being offered by VTS on the one hand and the software being offered by RTW on the other hand.
So were you going to say something?
Sort of, I guess, while we didn't specify the specific software program, I think from having listened to the panel and everything is that I think from what was presented by the two contractors is that RTW gave a better explanation or understanding or process of how they were going to maintain and track the vehicles so that the panel had a better feel that they were going to, that they would be able to demonstrate or prove to us, okay, how are these vehicles being maintained? Is it a software program that we're able to go in and observe or look from on our end? Or is it the contractor just has their software program and maybe it just says, okay, we did an oil change this month or the preventive maintenance schedule. But that's sort of, I think as far as the panel came away with a greater understanding of how how RTW was going to be maintaining the vehicles compared to VTS.
Well, let me try it a different way. Was there anything deficient in VTS's submission relative to that item?
Deficient? No.
Well,
in the panel's view.
So the panel's interview is what was, this is the scoring right here that you see. So during the interview, okay, for the proposal, sorry. So there was no inefficiencies as far as what the RFP said. But as far as how it was explained and the great depths that RTW went through to explain all the capabilities, I think there was, you could almost visualize their capabilities.
Okay, right. Staying on with table 1, let's go to a different, item number 13 is proof of liability insurance. For VTS, a certificate was provided. Is that an accord certificate?
Yes.
Right. And for RTW management provided incomplete certificate.
Yes.
Could you explain what that means?
So I believe they were missing the information about the sexual molestation requirements. And then I think the total quantities, but again, recognizing that for transit operators or for contractors, there's what they currently have and then there's what they have to acquire upon knowing that they're actually going to have a contract. So this was sort of their submittal, acknowledging that there were insurance requirements.
I'm sorry, I'm not tracking. In an RFP, you would typically, Sean, wouldn't you have a set of standards that the proposer needs to meet. And it appears to me RTW did not meet those standards.
So they didn't have the current insurance on file at the time that they submitted the RFP. Correct me if I'm wrong, Lydia, but I believe with the RFP, it was they could submit either their insurance or like basically an intent to acquire the insurance if they received the contract. And so while they recognize that they don't currently have the insurance, they were aware of the insurance requirements and would have to acquire it as a requirement for this contract. I'll mention that as part of our evaluation or like working on determining whether this agreement can go forward with our RTW, they have procured all of the necessary insurance requirements, including the dollar amounts required to meet the city's basically insurance requirements.
Okay. Does the RFP request endorsements or certificates of insurance?
We did not require endorsements. It was just either to provide, the proof of the insurance that they had, or to just acknowledge that they knew that there were our insurance requirements.
Can you just explain the rationale why the city would not require endorsements as opposed to an additional insured designation on an accord certificate?
So to my knowledge, I'm not familiar with a lot of RFPs that would require that endorsements be submitted as part of an RFP, because there is an expense associated at times to provide the actual endorsements and to list a contractor as additional insured. And given that this was to receive proposals, we were not requiring endorsements to be submitted.
Okay, all right. So I'm correct in understanding that RTW has no current operations locally
Correct.
and no current operations in California.
Correct.
On page 3 of the staff report, it says, and I quote, "The primary factor for VTS's lower score is the lack of experience with federally funded transit service requirements and lack of ability to demonstrate data collection technologies." So it seems to be two factors working there. So
yes.
let me ask about that. Was it the panel's determination that because of those two factors, VTS was unqualified to provide the transit service?
No. There was VTS was not determined to be unqualified. These were just the scores that were provided by the panel based upon like the point system that we had for each criteria, and so we just highlighted a couple of the notes or statements from some of the panelists. But no, VTS was not specifically determined to be unqualified.
All right, and I'm going to get to that in a minute in terms of the weighting that's utilized on the criteria. So really, this is a matter of, when I'm looking, we don't have that up there. We do have that up there. So for what you don't have up there is there are two items in table 1. On item 4 is the average proposal score, and Ventura Transit Service rated 85 out of 100, right?
Yes.
And RTW rated 99 out of 100.
Yes.
And that was for the proposal.
Correct.
Okay. And then with respect to the average interview score, Ventura Transit System rated 78 out of 100?
Correct.
And
for the
RTW
average, yes.
All right, and RTW rated 90 out of, average 90 out of 100, right?
Yes.
Okay. Is that a matter of degree as opposed to qualified versus in other words, in your opinion professionally, is there a large degree of disparity between those scores? They're pretty close, aren't they?
For as far as between for the average of both of them combined,
Yeah.
or just specifically the interview versus the proposal, or
No, the average of both of them combined.
the average? They are close. Yes,
They're relatively close.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm having difficulty drawing conclusions out of just the scoring in and of itself, so let me ask this. What criteria were assigned the most weight? And can you give the council the specific weighting numbers for the criteria? Do you have a PowerPoint on that?
No, not for all of the different weights for each of the.
Okay, then let me
But
try it this way. What were
not
the
for the
three most important criteria in terms that received the top weighting, WEIGHTING, from the panel? What were the top three factors?
So for the proposal, 30 points was like the largest scoring point system, and that was for the operating methodology.
Operating methodology.
Yes.
Operating methodology.
Can you explain what that is? What I'm trying to get at here is I am, you know, I'll talk about this later, but I'm struggling to see the real differences between the VTS score and the RTW management score. So if you can educate me on what you mean by operating methodology, I'd sure appreciate it.
Yes, so the operating methodology includes service delivery, proposed fleet facility plan, implementation timeline of the service, comprehensive staffing plan, and performance plan. Unfortunately, VTS did not provide some of that information, like the implementation timeline. So that's where RTW gained points.
Okay. How about the second highest criteria, second highest factor from a weighting standpoint?
25 points. That was for cost effectiveness, sorry, of the proposal.
Okay.
In relation to the quality and level of service to be provided. That was once again for the
Okay.
proposal itself.
Okay, and then what about the third?
We
got 30
Okay, so
points on one and
15.
25 on another.
So we have 15 for data collection and record keeping.
Okay.
We have another 15 for qualifications and experience, and another 15 for the understanding of the FTA requirements.
Okay. All right. That helps. Thanks. Hypothetically, would we have the ability, and maybe this is also a question for the city attorney as well, would we have the ability to contractually require a successful proposer as a condition of an award to retain a consultant who has the experience in federal compliance requirements?
You could certainly ask, and if they're willing to integrate that into their agreement, then that would become a requirement.
At the cost that they proposed?
Well, no, if you wanted to direct them to go back and see if there's additional costs associated with that, then yes. If your demand was it has to be for the same cost, well, that's up to them to decide if they'd be willing to still provide their proposal.
Okay, all right, thanks. Sean, I think the Vice Mayor brought up some points earlier on the use of transit funds, so let's talk about that for a second. The staff report says that per annum, it's about 1.7 million in, I think it's FTA 5307
Yes.
funds utilized to support our transit services, correct?
Yes.
All right. And the balance of that typically, rather than general fund, it typically comes from, sorry, I'm going to lapse here and just call it TDA Article 8, but what I mean is the Transportation Development Act funding.
Correct.
We normally make up the balance in TDA Article 8 funding, right?
Correct.
Okay. Do we also utilize TDA Article 8 funding for other purposes?
We use Article 8 for our Streets and Roads program, primarily for the CIP program.
Right, so we use TDA Article 8 money to pave our streets, right?
Yes, yeah. So
Okay.
specifically, it's 8C is transit, 8A is streets and roads.
Right. So is it fair to believe that to the extent that we can save on TDA Article, not having to use TDA Article 8 money, there's more money available to the city for its pavement management program, which is a great, Public Works does a wonderful job on pavement management. But we'd have more money available to do more pavement management.
Yes, with the caveat of we have to also be determined to be meeting all of our transit unmet needs in order to continue to use 8A money on streets and roads.
Right,
So
and
there's a caveat to, like there could be issues if, for example, we were determined not to be meeting all of our unmet transit needs. We would have to then meet all of those needs before we could go back to using any of our TDA 8 money on streets and roads.
Right, and that's a determination that's made annually, correct?
Correct.
Right, and in fact, on Friday's agenda for the Ventura County Transportation Commission, which I'm privileged to sit on for the
Yes.
council, there is a determination that there are no unmet transit needs.
Yes.
That
For Camarillo, yes.
for Camarillo, in other words, Camarillo is meeting all of its transit needs.
Yes.
Okay. I guess the point is, there are financial ramifications to the decision that we're making tonight. Let me reframe it. Is it fair to say that there are financial ramifications to the decision that we're making tonight because it potentially involves either greater or less or more use of TDA Article 8 funds?
Yes.
So the cost issues are significant. It's not, in other words, it's not a situation where, hey, the federal government is paying all of our transit costs. They're paying part of it, and the rest is coming from TDA Article 8 funds. And if we didn't have to spend those Article 8 funds, it's fair to think that we have those additional funds for pavement management, right?
Yes.
And pavement management's getting more and more expensive as we go, unfortunately.
Right. I'll defer
Although we
to
have a
the
great
Public
pavement
Works
management
Director.
program. We heard about that at the last meeting. Okay. So going back to the question on RTW, if the facility was in Thousand Oaks, we would have additional expense from a fuels standpoint of about $65,000 per annum?
Yes. Yeah.
$65,000?
Yeah, for my back of the napkin calculation, yes.
Okay, and is there any indication of what our estimated depreciation expense or vehicle wear and tear values would be by having that facility located outside Camarillo?
No, we did not go to that depth of attempting to figure out the calculation because it can vary by vehicle type, as well as the frequency with which that vehicle is utilized on a daily or monthly basis, based upon like the total number of miles that are put on the vehicle.
Right, but it's fair, is it not, to think about the wear and tear on vehicles and how often we have to replace them, because we sit up here and have to replace them every number of X years, correct?
Correct, yes.
So if there was a facility located outside the city of Camarillo and there was greater wear and tear on our vehicles, it's logical to believe that by some measure, those vehicles are being, there's more wear and tear on those vehicles and we would have to replace them at a faster clip.
Yes, potentially, yes.
That's a fair assumption.
Yes.
What, on the VTS proposal, where is their site in Camarillo? Table 1 indicates that it's in Camarillo.
I believe it's at the airport. They have a site at the
Okay.
Camarillo Airport.
So that's local.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so, and I'm coming to the end of my questions. Thank you for everybody's patience. So on table 2, the proposal cost comparison, and you've got, can you put up that comparison PowerPoint again?
For the 3 vendors?
Yeah, for the 3
Yes.
vendors. Okay, so RATP's cost would be,
So
two-
sorry.
Well, no, you go ahead, go first.
So what you have is, so the first two rows, the fixed cost and variable cost is the calculation using 12 months of service at the 12, at, you know, a monthly fixed cost for 12 months. And the variable cost is the revenue hour rate times 21,000 revenue hours, or estimated revenue hours. So your 2.8 million, 2.4 million, 2.05 million is essentially rows 1 and 2 added together for each of the columns.
Okay. And what's not indicated on this PowerPoint, not because you didn't want to, but it's in the table, you took the 4-year average, and there was about, RTW's cost was at 9.93 million estimated annual cost versus VTS's at an estimated cost of 8.9 million, correct?
Yes.
It's about $1 million difference between RTW and VTS.
I'm sorry, for the
4 years. In fact, the
yes.
cost difference was $1,001,782,
yes.
right? Okay. And what was the 4-year cost for RATP?
So for RATP, we did not do a 4-year projection because they provided pricing for fiscal year 24-25, and that would have been the extent to the contract extension, the pricing that we would have, because as we are now at the 1-year renewal options, they of course will have the ability to submit new pricing for when we get to fiscal year 25, 26, and so on. So we didn't do a 4-year projection for our RATP because we don't have we don't have 4 years of pricing submitted from them because we didn't and we didn't request that of them separate from the RFP process.
Right, and I understand, and I'm not asking anybody to speculate, but if I'm sitting up here and I'm trying to decide between 3 options, I'm trying to decide between VTS on the one hand and RTW on the other. I got VTS at 8.9 million for the 4 years, RTW at 9.9 million, and RATP, I don't know how to project that amount. Fully acknowledging that it's on a year-by-year basis and that they haven't provided us. But what would you expect would be a reasonable assumption for the amount of a 4-year contract? Is there a way to give us a number on that?
For 4 years, it could be if we look at the average for the past couple of years, I think we've seen between 5 to 8% increase between the two when we've done rate increases, but keeping in mind that those have been rate increases for the variable rate projection. This is a new year where we have a fixed and variable rate, like a different factor into what their cost is. But for the past couple of years, it's been 5 to 8% per year, depending upon, again, like with the tiered rates, even amongst the tiered rates, a certain tier, the tier between 1 year and the second year might be a greater price difference than even like another one of the tiered rates between like 60%, 70%, 80%.
Right, but all of these are on the dual rate structure, correct?
These ones, I mean,
Right.
for the ones that we have for the 4 years, yes.
Right. So it's oranges to oranges from that standpoint. I guess would it be reasonable in my position to look at RATPs and let's assume, and I think it's a faulty assumption, but assume that there's a constant cost over 4 years at 2.8 million. And if I multiply that 2.8 times 4, I'm going to be coming out with a number that is far in excess of $11 million for 4 years.
Yeah, without doing the calculation myself.
I don't know, I
I'll
was
take
just
your
trying to
word
do the
on
mental
it.
math. And
Yeah.
I'm lining up that mental math of 11, I think it was 11.2, 11.3 million,
Yes.
even assuming no increases from RATP, as opposed to 8.9 from VTS and 9.9 from RTW management. So I'm dealing with a situation where there's at least a couple of $1 million that we would otherwise have to spend in TDA Article 8 money that could otherwise potentially be utilized for our pavement management. Is that a fair way to think of it? In terms of
Potentially, yes.
because we have to make all kinds of trade-offs up here.
Yes.
Okay, okay. All right. Thanks, Sean. I know I asked you a whole lot, and Lydia, thank you. I know I asked a whole lot of questions. I appreciate your patience. All right. Are there any other questions from council before we hear from our public speakers? Okay.
I have one question.
Vice Mayor Kildee.
Yeah. Could I make the assumption that if you took the time to fill out these proposals, that you could do the job if the contracts were awarded? In other words, were all of these firms vetted as far as saying, look, okay, we've got these proposals here in our hands, and they would typically in transit submit the proposal if they didn't feel that they couldn't provide the necessary services if the contract is awarded to them?
That is the assumption, yes.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have, Your Honor.
Okay, great. All right, we're going to hear from our speakers on this agenda item. Thanks for everybody's patience. Again, I have to remind every speaker that they are limited to 3 minutes, and then you have to bring it to a close. First speaker is John O'Brien. John left. All right. Second speaker is Michael Birch.
Mr. Mayor, Mayor, the council, council members, thank you for hearing me tonight. My name is Mike Birch. I'm the Vice President of Operations for RATP Dev. And as addressed, we are headquartered in Fort Worth, Texas. Our parent company is in Paris, France. We are a $6 billion company. We operate in 16 countries. We have 40 locations here in the United States, Camarillo being one of them. We've served this contract since 2015. The presentation from staff today was great. There's a couple pieces that I would draw your attention to. Our amendments that were negotiated during COVID. So the old rate structure here, the original rate structure was an all-in rate, and the problem with an all-in rate is that when volume drops, there's no way to bifurcate the drop in rate from the revenue hours to what the actual costs are, and the fixed costs are just dumped into that rate. So we entered in negotiations with the city for amendments for tiered pricing. What that allowed you to do is control as the volume goes up or down, you pay either more or less for the services. When Sean approached us for this coming time, he brought this point forward, and we actually agree with him. RATP Dev would recommend a fixed and variable rate structure for a contract. In fact, most people in our industry would. It allows you the benefit of having a fixed contract. It's covering all your fixed costs, and then the variable is the variable. As the volume goes up or down, your fixed costs don't change. And if the volume was to drop a significant amount, we would lay operators off or hire more operators if the variable rate went up, if the volume went up. I wanted to quickly address your concerns over us not bidding. We didn't bid because we had been asked to provide pricing 3 different ways for our option years. We were under the assumption that at that time that we were essentially starting to negotiate the process. So we did that. We gave them three, and we were shocked to find out 2 weeks later that they were issuing an RFP. I sent them a letter on January 31st explaining our position. We were expecting the city to come back to us to negotiate. We have the advantage of having a contract that can be negotiated and amended. And we were expecting the city to come back and negotiate with us after they'd completed the RFP process. Obviously, that hasn't happened, which is why we're here today. And I'm happy to answer. I know you can't ask me questions right now as a public speaker, but if you'd like to know more about RATP Dev or ask me specific questions, I'll make myself available. I flew here last night from Fort Worth, and I'm happy to stay as long as necessary.
No, thank you very much. Do any council members have any? Council members, it's okay for council members to ask you questions if they have any. Anybody have any?
I have. So take me back a little bit as to, I'm a little hazy as to why you did not submit a proposal when you did receive the RFP, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
And when you received that, Kind of educate me a little bit as to why you didn't go forward with it.
Yeah, so when the city approached us, they asked us to price out our option years. So we did that. So we gave them tiered pricing, we gave them fixed and variable pricing. Then the third one was with a pass-through of parts. Right now, our ATP Dev operates. We pay all the parts, we pay all the labor. There's never. I want to make sure this gets out there too. We've never asked the city for an adjustment. You're running buses that are, in some cases, 3 times past their useful life. The useful life for a cutaway in a van is 100,000 miles or 4 years. We have buses that are over 300,000 miles, and we have some that are 10 and 11 years old. 13 of your 19 vehicles are past their useful life. Our original assumption in our bid was $5,000 per month on an up-to-date fleet. Our maintenance costs are now $20,000 a month, and I've never come back to the city and asked for an adjustment for that. During the COVID inflation, we had the unfortunate, to nobody's fault, the pandemic hit when it hit, and we just signed a new contract that had no idea that we were going to have a pandemic and that the inflation would go crazy. We have not asked the city to help shore us up on wages either. And over the last 2 years, we've passed out 13% wages to our employees. As it's mentioned, our operation is in Camarillo. We employ citizens of Camarillo. We have 35 employees. I was a little surprised to hear tonight, we are not leaving Camarillo. We actually operate 2 other contracts out of our Camarillo location. And so we're going to continue to operate those 2 contracts regardless. So our location is not available to another contractor. Our software is proprietary. It's specifically built by RATP Dev. We have telematics on the vehicles that tell us when bus operators are driving well and not driving well. We have a risk prevention plan that does all that. All the technology that's in the current RFP, we exceeded already. To answer your question, though, Mr. Vice Mayor, the reason why we did not bid was because they have every single data point they need for our performance. And while it's awkward for Sean to stand up in front of you all and tell you what he thinks of the service, it's easy for me to brag on our guys. We operate your service at 95% on-time performance, which means when there is a citizen sitting at a bus stop or calling for a paratransit ride, 95% of the time we are there on time. And I supervise 19 locations. Camarillo is number 1. They have the highest on-time performance in my region. The other thing that I would, we're really proud about this contract is we've been here for a very long time, and we've always considered ourselves a partner of the city. So they had all our data points. They had just asked us for our pricing 3 different ways. We expected that the city would come back to us at the end of the RFP process and negotiate with us on our option years. We still have 6. We're in option year 1 of 7. We still have 6 more years that could be executed.
So that gives you, got some time then.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's all I have.
Okay, I had a question for you too.
Yes, sir.
When I was inquiring about the costs over a 4-year spread, and I utilized RATP's first year, I know it was up on the PowerPoint before, but I believe it was at 2.8, just over 2.8 million. Was it reasonable, no, let me reframe it. Was it unreasonable to believe that that price point would remain at least static for 4 years in terms of looking at what the total cost might be over 4 years?
No, it wouldn't be unreasonable to expect that, but that pricing was our initial offering. We expected to negotiate with the city on our option years. So we gave you our numbers the way they were categorized with the whole anticipation of negotiating the final contract. And it's really hard to, you've made some excellent questions today about apples and oranges. It's really difficult to compare. Right now, our operation, we pay all the expenses. On the proposed RFP, that changes. So all of the pricing that you have from us and all the invoices you've ever paid for us is us paying for parts and all the labor. There's no pass-through. The only pass-through we have is fuel. That's the only one we currently have.
Right, and in my hypothetical, though, was no consideration of any sort of inflationary issues. In other words, costs going up during that time. It assumed a static level,
Yeah,
which is probably not feasible, correct?
Correct, but we were never asked to provide 4 years either, 4 years of pricing, and obviously volume makes a difference. We're a volume-based business, so being able to have, if we're being offered to, exercise 4 years of our options, it's really easy for me to find value in that and pass that value back to the city.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Birch.
No,
very
thank
much.
you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, next up is, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this correctly, Sarah Pontecchi from Ventura Transit.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council. My name is Sarah Pontecchi. I'm here representing Ventura Transit with Masood Babayan, President of Ventura Transit. We're here today to express our strong concern regarding the decision not to award a local company, in this case Ventura Transit, the Camarillo Dial-A-Ride contract based on the reasoning provided to the Council, specifically regarding our purported lack of experience in operating a federally funded transit service. It was stated that RTW has demonstrated knowledge and experience in this area, whereas Ventura Transit did not provide specific evidence, but rather explained our ability to perform. However, we believe this decision overlooks critical aspects of our track record and capabilities that directly align with the requirements of federally funded transit services. First and foremost, we would like to highlight our extensive experience providing dial-a-ride services. Our experience goes back to 91, when 91 to 95, we successfully delivered the dial-a-ride services to the city of Calabasas under Checker Cab Company, and from 2004 to 2009, we provided supplemental dial-a-ride services to the city of Camarillo under Yellow Cab, both companies owned by the same proprietors of Ventura Transit. These periods of service underscore our longstanding familiarity with the operational nuances and regulatory requirements. Moreover, we're currently the contractor for the City of Calabasas Fixed Route Service, which is a federally funded contract. We actually transitioned that contract from MV Transportation successfully. We have consistently been in compliance with the reporting requirements, demonstrating our ability to navigate and fulfill obligations of federally funded transit services. We also operate the City of Malibu's Dial-A-Ride, which has similar reporting requirements and have been consistently re-awarded that contract. Earlier, Mr. Mayor, you asked about retaining a consultant to help with federal funding issues if needed. We actually already have retained that person, Robert Yelda. He used to be with the City of Calabasas, and he actually sat in our interview for this contract. In Ventura Transit, we want to highlight that we are a local company. We are operated right here out of Camarillo. We have the drivers that are employed, from Camarillo residents, unlike RTW, which is located in Utah and lacks the direct ties to our community. We're located right here at the Camarillo Airport, and if we were to be awarded the contract, we did state that we would open up the positions available to any of RATP's staff that also needed to continue their employment. In addition to our qualifications and local ties, we'd like to emphasize the significant cost savings. We've already gone over that in great detail, so I don't want to take up too much time, but that over $1 million in cost savings is a substantial savings that would directly benefit the city and its residents, allocating resources more efficiently while maintaining high-quality services. In conclusion, we respectfully request that this be tabled for further discussion.
Thank you very much. Don't go away for a second. Any council members have questions for Ms. Pontecchi? I have
one, if I may.
No, go ahead.
Correct me if I'm wrong, you were saying that you have the contract, I believe, for Calabasas.
Yes.
Are their vehicles stored in Camarillo, or do you have a facility up in Calabasas?
We have a facility in Calabasas as well. So but their vehicles stay close to that contract for operational purposes. The Camarillo Dial-A-Ride contract, if awarded to us, they would be stationed here out of the Camarillo Airport.
Is there enough capacity there for that?
Oh, absolutely. And we actually retained a larger part. So we own our premises at the Camarillo Airport, so we don't even have to worry about a lease. But we did work out a deal with the Camarillo Airport in anticipation of this contract where we have a specific space that would be allocated to the Camarillo Dial-A-Ride.
What do you store any vehicles at this location at this particular point?
We do, but we have multiple locations on the property at the Camarillo Airport that are all within eyeshot of our building that we own.
Thanks.
A couple questions from me. Is that a secure facility at Camarillo Airport?
It is. So, and the location that we retained for this contract has actual locking gates. The Camarillo Airport, because of the nature of the business, is constantly patrolled. And as I'm sure you know, the Sheriff's Department also has recently moved in. So there's a very high security presence there.
I thought I recalled sitting on VCTC that VTS also operates paratransit services under the Access for All program.
We do.
I'm sorry, I think I missed that one. Where is that program?
So we operate Access for All for actually a number of counties. So we do have Ventura counties. It operates right here out of the Camarillo Airport. We have San Luis Obispo counties, which operates out of our facility in Santa Maria. We have San Luis Obispo counties, which operates out of our facility in San Luis Obispo.
But does it operate in Ventura County as well?
Yeah. Sorry about that. Yeah, Ventura counties operates out of our location at the Camarillo Airport.
So does that currently serve, what areas of Ventura County then?
The entirety of Ventura County.
The entirety of the county?
Yes.
Including Camarillo?
That is correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any other questions?
May I add something, please? I'm not the speaker, but if you guys award the contract to us today.
Could you speak into the microphone,
okay.
please?
What I'm going to do, and I'm going to ask you, sir, to wait and put in a card. And go ahead and fill out a card, and then you can come up in a little bit, if that's okay?
Yes, please.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, Charles Sandlin.
Honorable Mayor and honorable council members, it's a pleasure to be back up here again speaking with you guys. The one question I don't think anybody's really asked here tonight, and you guys have asked a lot of great questions. You guys have a great staff. I'm sure there's great companies here. But why did the local major transit operators not bid on this contract? Why did MV, who runs every other dial ride in this county, except for the city of Camarillo, not bid on the contract? That would be like, let's say, a trash contract like E.J. Harrison. It'd be like Waste Management not bidding on the contract. Or it'd be like that new company, I don't even know what they called, out of Thousand Oaks, not bidding on the contract. The reason being is because there's not enough meat on this bone. There really isn't. These other companies looked at this RFP, they looked at RATP's pricing, and they're like, we can't beat their price, so why invest the time, the effort, and the money in this RFP to provide a higher price than what they're currently being offered right now? You really got to think about that. Why are they not bidding on this contract? And believe me, I'm sure MV would love to have a monopoly on all the dial-a-ride services in Ventura County. I'm sure First Transit would like to get a foothold back here in the county that they used to have. But if they can't make money, they're not going to waste their time. And I'm so thankful I do not work in transit anymore. This is the most stressful job. I am so happy to be in the insurance business now because it's a lot less stress. But it really takes a lot of resources, a lot of assets, and it's a lot of risk. You could kill people providing transit services, literally kill people. I mean, my dad and I used to stay up at night and just think, gosh, this is just crazy. What are we doing? And eventually we ended up selling our company because we just didn't want to deal with it anymore. But it's a huge risk to operate outside the state of California or come to California and operate in the state of California. Every company is going to get sued for meal breaks and rest breaks in the state of California no matter what. And if they haven't experienced it yet, welcome to California. You're going to get a class action lawsuit for meal breaks and rest breaks. It's just what it is. The city of Camarillo requires a lot of resources, a lot of assets. The citizens demand it and expect it. And anything less than what they are getting right now, you guys will get phone calls. This is a major decision you guys got to make. There's a big price difference between these guys. And I would just ask yourself, why did the other guys not bid on this contract? I'll leave you with that. I hope you guys have a wonderful evening. Thank you. Any questions?
I have a question, Charles.
Yes.
May I? So, were you referring to RATP that they didn't submit a contract, or are you referring to others that potentially could that didn't?
The companies that when we were in the transit industry, there was MV, there was First Transit. We were always competing against them for transit contracts. Any transit company like that sees a contract that has meat on the bone, they're going to go after it. Anything where it's just a bone, there's no meat, there's really no. If you don't have a bone, you want a bone to chew on. But if you have a bone, you got to have at least some meat to chew on the bone so you can stay alive. That's
so
just
kind of what
my
you're
analogy.
saying is that there's not a lot left on the table with this. In other words, that the margins are somewhat slim, if not slim.
Pretty much, we were doing a charity service when we were operating this contract from Roadrunner. It was literally a charity service because we would provide, and I'm sure the same company is still providing, because it's expected, we set the standard to provide above and beyond service. I would say it's no reason why that they got Camarillo as their #1 performing city. And it's a big transition. It's a lot. The software is in something that's not talked about. The software transition is going to be a nightmare. You're transitioning to a whole new platform of software. In insurance, we just did that with the California Fair Plan. The state of California just transitioned their software. That was in October. They are still messed up in, what month are we in now? May? It's still not right. And so you have a risk of a software transition, not just an operations transition. And the drivers, most of these employees live in the city of Camarillo or Oxnard. I don't think we had one from the city of Thousand Oaks. So if you had to go up to Thousand Oaks, it's a big push on these employees to spend that extra money to drive up there to go work out of the city of Thousand Oaks. It's wear and tear on their vehicles, and it's the wear and tear on your vehicles. I don't think the numbers were actually calculated out 100%. But again, this contract doesn't have meat on the bone. There's not the big price differences that are there. It's just not. That's why you don't have another major operator bidding on the bid. I would go back to staff and I would say, hey, why didn't they bid on this contract? And if I put out an RFP for anything, I want to see, well, why didn't I get somebody to give me a proposal on it? I've got RFPs for the storage project we're working on. I got certain contractors that have told me, sorry, we can't do it. It's too big. There's too much competition that's in the bid. And where you're at now, we can't make any money on it. I like that because I'm, going to be building this facility, but I don't know what those contractors that are the lowest price are going to do. Are they going to cost me more money in the long run? My demo guy has. My demo guy promised me $22,000. We're at $45,000 right now. And so, that's just my current experience of what's going on right now.
Okay.
But any other questions?
Thank you.
Concerns?
Just real quick, I haven't had a T-bone steak in years, but I'm sitting here visualizing, the meat on the bone. They're not being much. But we've got a number of options, and we do have two proposers, one local, one non-local, that have proposed, right?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Stanley.
My pleasure.
Okay, next up is, I believe I just have a first name. It's Sandy? Thank you. No, I hope I read that right.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Thank you.
I'm a resident of Camarillo, longtime resident of Camarillo, even before when Charles had Roadrunner. I'm also a dual federal OSHA safety trainer, so I know a little bit about transit because I've worked in that as well. Residents of Camarillo want to keep our current transit provider, who is RATP. RATP wants to keep us. RATP is a company that has the local base, the buses are kept local, and the employees are local. They also have a branch in Santa Ynez, as well as doing a great job running VCTC. RTW is out of Utah. The only time they did any transit work in California, it failed miserably. They're a mom and pop organization and absolutely not had the type of experience needed to handle all the difficult and different facets that RATP does, and especially for us here in Camarillo. We have a lot of upcoming expansion in Camarillo that RATP can handle. RTW cannot and has no positive track record in California. They failed miserably already here. The citizens of Camarillo are not interested in having yet another company leave us stuck like Coach America did when they went under and we had no transportation and left our residents stranded for a month. If you vote in RTW, it will happen again. Let us keep what we know works for our residents here. They want to keep RATP. I hope you will listen to us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker is, oh goodness, Ms. Eula?
Yes.
I almost got it. Okay.
Everybody butchers it, but that's okay.
Thank you. Please come up.
That's my nickname, and I like using it, so.
All right, thank
First
you.
of all, I want to say thank you. This is my first time to one of your meetings, and I didn't know what to expect. I don't do politics, but I admire every one of you, and I appreciate what y'all do for the city of Camarillo. I may not agree with everything, but you guys are all fabulous. And sitting here listening to all this conversation going on, it's way over my head. I'm trying to understand it. So I'm just going to stick to what I came here for and not try to change anything. So anyway, I've been a resident of Camarillo for 35 years. We love this city. And I was informed via social media that the proposed company does not have a very good reputation in California. My son is special needs, and he rides the bus, or the dial ride and the buses all over the place. And to have changes for him and anybody else who's out riding the buses, it just could be very detrimental. I find it interesting that we're having this discussion tonight, and they're talking about a new service starting January 1st. How can a new company come in 2 months and take over and have everything smooth sailing? So I'm all for keeping where we're at and people who know the routes and what they've been doing. That'll do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else who wishes to address the city council on this? Sir, did you want to be heard? Oh, wait, I got some more sheets. I'm so sorry. I apologize. Okay, hang on a second. I've got two more. One is, the first is George, and I apologize, I can't.
Coates.
George Coates. Mr. Coates?
Great, thank you.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
I'm gonna get my prescription changed on my glasses.
I get it all the time. I appreciate you taking a few minutes. Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members, and staff. My name is George Goetz. I'm the president of RTW Management. You've heard a lot about the company, but I want to come up and say a few things. Hadn't planned on it, but I also want to give you a chance to ask me questions. I know I agree with Charles. It is a hard job, especially the procurement process. It's hard to get to know somebody in a proposal, even in an interview, and now with the great job Sean did on his presentation. So I'll be quick, kind of go through some of the things I heard that you may still have questions about. As far as location, we're able to get a location in Camarillo. Like Sean said, we have 3 choices. I'd spoken to Charles earlier and talked about his location. The last I heard, it's still a go. There are 2 others that we're considering. One is in Thousand Oaks. It's about 3 miles from the Camarillo airport, so it's about 9 miles as opposed to 6.1, so it's a pretty small difference. And as far as vehicle maintenance, or as far as wear and tear on the vehicles, really the wear and tear comes when you're stopping and going, you have a passenger load, right? The deadhead's not as significant of a maintenance event, and the maintenance plan really does matter. So we use a system called Fleetio. It ties into to our GPS tracking system. So we can see, we have smart cams, we can see the drivers, we can see where they are, what they're doing, if they're on their cell phones. And we know what the mileage is. So we know when to maintain the vehicles because we know when they hit their mileage intervals. We also do what's called predictive maintenance. So it's above and beyond preventive maintenance where we check the oil and we say, hey, are there shavings in the oil? Is there something else we might want to look at before it actually happens, replace parts prophylactically? So that helps. It makes a huge difference because the vehicles belong to the city. So those are all things that we do that are required. So in a proposal, you can't just say, yes, we'll do what is being asked, right? The requirements and the proposal are to say how you do it, a detailed plan to get from day one to, or from today to day one, which is something we've done 3 times in the last year. So we've started up 3 operations, and I've been behind this podium before, and understand your concerns and understand the startup process. So you've heard today some things like, size, local risk, but really what matters is who's going to be safer, who's going to have better customer service, and who's going to have better on-time performance, right? Those are definite metrics that matter to the citizens, and we can provide all of those. A few other things, RTW Management specializes in cities, small urban from 50,000 to 150,000. So this is really our wheelhouse, and we're built for this type of operation. And so in addition to the expertise that we have on staff, you also have me. So if there's a problem, I get the call, right? And there's no committee, there's no middle layer of management. We can resolve things very quickly, and that's the reason we've got such good customer service and such, we got great references. And it's important, this would be our 3rd biggest contract, so it's big enough to matter, but it's not, definitely not too big for us to handle. And but it's important to us, right? We have a real vested interest in making sure we're successful, because in order to grow, we have to have good customer references.
Thank you, Mr. Coates. Vice Mayor Kildee, I think you have a question for Mr. Coates.
Since you're here.
Sure, thank you.
You understand California? I mean, in other words, California can be, unique in some aspects?
Yes, absolutely. So in transit with CDL drivers, most of our operations are governed by the FTA, but there are a few things that are unique to California as far as Wage Order 9. So 1070 has some requirements, which would, one, require us to retain all of the employees. I'm not sure if the other entrants know that, but not only do we plan to, but we're required to retain all of the incumbent employees. And so we understand that. Those are really 2 operational differences. Other than that, really the safety and drug testing, all those things are managed by the FTA, which is a federal organization. There are a few differences in employment law and how it's applied, but we're familiar with those as well.
And this is a very tight timeline. Do you have the capacity to fulfill that?
We do. Like I said, we've done this 3 times in the last year, transitioned operations. And the first thing we do is interview drivers, right? We want to show up, interview staff, let them know we're here. And our intent is, if we are awarded, to interview all of them within the next 48 hours. And then 48 hours from that, we'd send offer letters. So everybody knows within 4 days that they've been offered a job, they know what the rate is, they don't have to worry about the transition. And that's really been the key to success in the last 3 transitions, is that we talk to the drivers, we talk to the maintenance staff, we get to know them, we let them ask us questions, we spend all day with them getting to know what their concerns are, how we can improve, and let them know, that we're here, they can call us, and if they have any questions about the transition process, we can answer them for them, help them get comfortable with it.
My last question, why did you take the time to submit a bid?
That's a good question. It's what we do. We operate, like I said, small urban transit, and this actually, I was talking to Marilee, she's got 20 years of transit experience, public transit experience, and on the way out here, I was telling her, this is what I enjoy doing. I enjoy meeting the people, helping them understand what we're going to do, and then developing drivers into managers. And as we grow, we're a growing company. We're growing, like I said, pretty quickly, but at a measured rate, at a steady pace. And the value of that is that we get drivers who get to be promoted to managers. So, for example, Earl Hawkins, who's our proposed general manager, he started out in Scottsdale, Florida with us. We took over the operation. He was a road supervisor. So that's, if you're familiar with the position, he goes out and, if there are bodily fluids in the bus or whatever it is, it's a tough position. But pretty quickly after we took over, we made him assistant general manager, and within a year, he was the general manager of the entire operation. And so all the other drivers saw that Earl was the one who's doing all the dirty work. If there's any question, you go ask Earl. And so, but he was still just the road supervisor. So after we took over, we promoted him to general manager or assistant general manager, and then ultimately general manager. The drivers see, hey, if I do this, if I step up, if I do what I'm supposed to, I can be promoted. And that's really the magic that we bring. There's a lot of compliance and a lot of technology that we can make things easier for the city. Our reporting technology, our reporting capabilities. I mentioned a few of them, but really we use that technology in order give our management more time to focus on the people and their drivers.
And do you pay your drivers at the current rate?
So we'll at a minimum pay what they're currently being paid. And we anticipate a raise, if not immediately, very shortly thereafter.
Thank you.
Any other? Councilmember Martinez Bravo.
Thank you. So you mentioned that you had 3 possible options for operations. Is it 2 in Camarillo and the 1 in Thousand Oaks with a 3-mile difference, correct?
Correct.
And then the 2 in Camarillo, what locations did you say you were looking at?
So there's one on Calle Suerte, and there's one, and the other one is the incumbent's current facility, which we've just learned is unavailable.
Okay,
So we've got 2 left, which isn't uncommon. You can't really sign a contract until we have a contract. And so, sometimes things fall out, sometimes new things become available, but at the moment we have 2 that we could sign on right now. And the one, like I said, is well within the requirements of the RFP.
Okay. And so there was a public comment about your work in California. So have you worked in California? And
Yes, that's a great question. So we operated the fixed route service at the San Diego VA. We were a subcontractor. So the contract was set aside for a service-disabled veteran-owned small business. We're not a service-disabled veteran-owned small business, so we were approached by another company and asked to kind of operate the service as a subcontractor. We did that for over a year. Things went well. They loved us. It was going really well. COVID hit, and this operator had trouble in his other operations, stopped paying us, and we ultimately went to arbitration. They just stopped paying us for a number of months, and then we ultimately had to pull it. We were successful. We won damages. They went bankrupt, and we had to take our equipment back, so we had to leave the contract.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mr. Coates.
Absolutely. Any other questions? Anything? Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Masood Babayan.
Good evening. Thank you for the time, Mr. Mayor and City Councilman. We invested over $4 million in property in Camarillo. We bought 4 acres of land, 20,000 square feet of buildings. The purpose of staying here, we are not going anywhere. We are the largest transportation provider on the coast. We have offices across California, in Santa Barbara, in Santa Maria, San Luis Obispo. And they mentioned we don't have enough experience in federal transit services. We've been doing data rate for Calabasas for the last 5 years. In fact, we hired the transit manager of City of Calabasas, who has over 30 years experience, to be on board with us to assist us in the process. If you give us a contract, we can start tomorrow. We have the drivers, we have the facility. I've been in this business long enough to know that if these guys want to get an office space in Camarillo, it will take them at least 3 months to set up the phone system and communication. When we moved to this facility, it took me 180 days to set up the phone system and the computer system, all of that. We're ready to go. We have the largest call center in this facility. We can accommodate Camarillo data without any issues. Would be a smooth transition. If the existing drivers doesn't want to work for us, we have enough drivers to start the services immediately. We're saving the city about $1 million overall in contracts. We also own a shop in the city of Oxnard, 2 miles away. So as far as wear and tear on the vehicle, we can save the city a lot of money on maintenance and mileages and all of that. So basically, overall, we're going to save the city lots of money because we think we owe it to the city to save you guys, and you can spend the money in other projects. So if you don't want to give us a contract, I would suggest that keep it local with RATP, extend their contracts, negotiate a rate with them, but keep everything in Camarillo, because the money stays here, it doesn't go to other states. I think that would benefit the entire city people. I want to thank you for the consideration, and if you guys have any question, please ask me.
Any questions? No. Thank you very much.
Right.
All right. Are there any other speakers in the audience who wish to address the council on this item? Thanks, everybody, for being patient. It's been a long evening. All right. Hearing none, I'll bring that part to a close, and we'll bring it back to council. Does anyone on the council have additional questions for staff at this point? Okay. Who'd like to? Decision time. Who'd like to start off?
I'll start off.
Sounds like the vice mayor wants to
I'll
start.
start
Okay.
I've been involved in transit ever since I've been an elected official, and there's nothing easy about transit at all. And everybody in the room that's been involved in this, I think, will agree to that. Continuities, I don't know, let me phrase this. Continuity in transit is enormous. It's very important to have a provider that can provide the service here. That really is number one in my book here. Usually transit costs, like a lot of other costs, are anything but fixed. At least in my experience, they've been anything but fixed here. The dial-a-ride, when we started that, was a service that a lot of people that reside here and that used it had a lot of really great things to say about the dial-a-ride service. The fixed route service has always been, to a certain extent, a work in progress here. To a certain extent, we've had times where we've had a lot of riders, and we've had times when we have not had a lot of riders on that. The routes recently have been fairly stable. It's taken a long time to kind of figure out the routes and where to drop folks off, and that takes a lot of time to do that. But the costs are extremely important with all of this, but the quality of service is very, very important too, that you don't want to whiff on transit. And I've been involved where we had a lot of issues with that, and we had to get a provider to come in and pick up the service. And my issue that I've got tonight, there's several of them, but the RTW, being that they don't know the local community and they don't know exactly what our transit service technically is all about, because there's going to be problems with it. With transit, there's always a problem. There's always. One of the speakers said that, you know, it takes 2 to 3 weeks, perhaps a month even, to get the telephone systems down. And that is a very valid point here. So my issue with RTW is I'm just not convinced that they can come in at this short of a time and do the job that needs to be done here. We owe it to those folks that ride the system that we provide the best service that we can provide to them. It's challenging enough to be on time and not have one of the vehicles break down. You know, you've got drivers that somewhat come and go. Some of them stay a long time here, some of them don't. It's very important, I think, to develop a personal relationship with your drivers, because a lot of these folks that use the service, they use it somewhat continuously, if not totally continuously. Cost is a big thing for me. The current provider, I think, has done a very good job here. I'm not quite sure why they didn't submit the proposal, but they didn't. But it seems to me that if, in fact, that we do want to make a change here, that VTS is local, they've got experience in this, they're somewhat more affordable, knowing that you know, those numbers could change. I've been doing this long enough to where, you know, the numbers, things come up. I mean, my God, we've got fuel just went up $1 over 2 weeks. I mean, you deal with that. My insurance provider has just decided he didn't want to do business with us anymore. This is all the cost of doing business, that you have to be able to deal with all that. And there's going to be issues that are going to come up with this contract, regardless of who we award this contract for. But it seems to me that VTS is if we could save a little money, maybe we could put more money into our pavement management program. Again, we have to make sure that there's not any unmet needs that come up, which could there, but it is, you know, enticing. It is very, you know, interesting to me that they could provide the service at less of a cost, and they've already got the drivers. They don't need to go out and hire new drivers here. They have a facility in Camarillo, and I think with transit, it's really important to have a track record there. So my suggestion is that we go with VTS, I'm sorry.
Who wants to go next? I'm looking at everyone.
I'll go.
Councilmember Tennyson.
I'll go. I think Vice Mayor Kildee hit the nail on the head. Continuity is very important to having a successful transit program. I asked staff if they're happy with RATP. They are. I'm certain there's some citizen complaints that come in, just like they do for any aspect of city government. And as I understand from the RATP representative here tonight, the $2.8 million was the opening negotiation number. It's not the final number. I would like to see staff negotiate with RATP and see if we can get that number closer to the RTW, but I, like the vice mayor, would favor a local company, and my second choice would be VTS.
Who wants to go next? Councilmember Martinez Bravo.
There's a lot here and a lot to consider, and I really appreciate all of the time that went into bringing the information forward. I'm very thankful to RATP for the service that they have provided to the city for these many years. I do have concerns over that, the discrepancy in the amount, which is why I was gearing more toward the other two. And I do like to also support local for a variety of reasons. Quite honestly, I personally would want to see the information provided a little clearer so that we could have the apples to apples type of comparison. It was a little challenging to go back and forth on some of those items, which I think would help, you know, for me to quantify and to move forward on it. As it stands right now, I'm really in between VTS, which is the local one, and also I'm sorry, not RATP. I'm like getting confused. What is it? RTW, yes. And I think because I don't necessarily have, I don't know if I have all of the information. That's kind of where I stand. It's a challenge.
Now I get to try. First of all, I wish that RATP had gone through the RFP process, if only for us to have a better proposal comparison between the three choices we have before us. I too tend to like to choose locally, but I'm also looking at the cost here. And the easiest way for me to compare the cost was to compare the variable revenue hour rates. And if I just look at that, I've got RATP at $62.19, RTW at $44.79, and VTS at $40 an hour. That's a significant difference between RATP and the other two. And so cost weighs heavily on my mind. I'm not worried too much about RTWs in the short time frame. I don't know why. I trust in them. And I also trust in our city staff. And I trust in our staff that sat down and had this panel and tried to objectively really rate the RFPs or the proposals in the RFP process. I'm leaning to go with RTW right now. That's where I am.
Okay. Just starting off generally, first of all, staff, thank you for a good presentation. Thank you for patiently answering all of the questions directed at you. One thing I've learned over the last several years sitting on the Ventura County Transportation Commission and the MetroLink Board of Directors is that, and you're going to say, yeah, no kidding, public transit has some very difficult challenges coming out of the pandemic. And to some extent, VCTC, for example, has recovered much better. Local buses have recovered much better than, for example, MetroLink in terms of percentage of riders opposed to pre-pandemic percentages. From a business standpoint, the transit providers, I don't envy any of you because the business models are consistently changing, and they have changed both pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. And they're also, the difficult part is that there have been uniformly high rate increases for, it's not just for City of Camarillo, it's for all municipalities and public transit providers. So it's an era of increased cost. And I will also say, I think it's difficult, I've got to recognize the fact that for public transit providers, it is difficult to recruit personnel. It is difficult to recruit bus drivers, in public-facing positions for a variety of reasons. So we've got a tough decision. We've got three basic options, and I asked a lot of questions about the panel, and I respect what the panel did. I really do, and I respect their scoring, but I just have a different view. I guess before I go further, I just want to have a disclosure on the record that the CEO for VTS is in my Rotary Club for Camarillo. I don't get a privilege to see him very often, and we have never, ever discussed this issue. So I don't believe that there's any kind of conflict at all. We have not discussed this. And so I feel no conflict relative to Mr. Babibian. I think when I go back to the panel isn't saying that VTS is unqualified. The panel was saying they're just not as experienced as RTW. That's the way I interpret it. And I think, bottom line is here, reasonable minds can differ on an approach and on a selection. But from a cost standpoint, which I know is important to the Vice Mayor, and support of a local firm, from those perspectives, I think we should award the contract to VTS. I agree, a lot of things I agree with what my colleagues have said. I particularly agree with the comment that I'm grateful to RATP that has provided excellent service through these years I won't say for whatever reason because it was articulated, but they made a business decision not to propose on this. And so from an options standpoint, my view is, the question for me is, with great respect for RTW, my decision point is between VTS or whether to negotiate or go back and retain RATP for another year. I do believe, and I'm going to ask a question in a minute. Sorry, I did have one question which has occurred to me, and that is, and so let me ask it at this point. In our contract with RATP, and in a contract you would have with any transit provider, explain again what the contract termination provisions would be. And I'm not saying for cause, but let's say we had or you can explain both. One would be for cause and one would be without cause. In other words, what kind of escape valve would we have? And could we negotiate a contract that would last only 1 year?
I guess my follow-up question for that would be for which criteria you're talking about, specifically to the contract we have with RATP?
Well, let me ask it this way. The RFP presupposes that the contract would be 4 years, correct?
Correct.
Is the contract terminable at any time during those 4 years according to the RFP?
It is.
Is that at the discretion of the city?
There are a couple of different, there's termination for cause and termination for just because we want to, or convenience, termination for convenience.
Right, without cause.
Right, without cause. I don't recall off the top of my head of what the difference between the two is, as far as whether like for cause, if it's 60 plus days or greater, or if there's fewer. I would have to honestly like relook at the agreement but there is a for cause, and
it may be a question that's better directed to the city attorney, and perhaps I let you off the hook
for the moment, yeah.
And ask the city attorney her view on this.
And I can speak to what the contract was with the RFP, so I can just read what's in front of me here. So that's the termination section is section 13. Termination for cause is upon 30 days notice for defaults. And once they receive the notice, then they have to begin the transition of the service. Convenience is, let me scroll. Termination of convenience is a 60 days written notice. So that's for any reason.
And so it's a 4-year contract, but in a without cause situation with a 60-day escape hatch.
For convenience and 30 days for if there's a breach.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not a year after year where we have to renew each year, correct? It's a 4-year deal, according to the
correct.
RFP.
Yes.
There's
yeah.
it's not 1 year and then extend to the next year. It's a 4-year term.
Okay. And is there, in the without cause provision in the RFP, is there any additional compensation provided if the city were to terminate the contract for its convenience?
You need to pay for services rendered to that period of time.
Up until the cessation of services?
Correct.
So there's no severance amount per se or extra over and above whatever the services?
Right.
cost?
City shall alone be liable for payment under the payment provisions of this contract for services rendered before the effective date of the termination.
Okay, all right, thanks. So, continuing on, thank you both. I can't ignore that if you go back to the PowerPoint on the total estimated costs, and particularly on table 2.
Tony, could we put that up on again? Would you mind?
Sure.
Thank
Sean, could you put that back up?
I'm saying, you'd like the slide with the 4 years?
You bet.
Okay.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
This is the one with the 4-year pricing, and then there's a separate table that has the
Let's
three
have the-
compared.
Yeah, let's do the comparison table.
Okay.
Okay, and that's pricing for 1 year, but we don't have a comparison table for 4 years, correct?
Correct.
Okay, but we can extrapolate. So right now, in the first year, the difference between VTS on the one hand and RATP on the other hand is about $750,000. And we can see the difference in RTW is right in the middle. John, was there a slide that was comparable to Table 2 with the proposal cost comparison over 4 years? I guess there isn't there?
No, there is not.
Okay, well, I'll just submit for the record that we have a Table 2, it's in the staff report, which has the estimated annual cost for RTW over 4 years at $9,930,219. VTS at $8,928,437. And we don't have a comparable 4-year estimate for RATP, but we do know what the first year cost would be for RATP, which is $2,125. If I multiply $2,125,000 by 4, I'm going to come out well in excess of $11 million. That is a more than $2 million price swing between the two providers, between RATP on the one hand and VTS on the other, during that 4-year period. And I realize that, you know, this may not be perfect in terms of total costs, but it's instructive to me, and I can't ignore that amount of money, particularly when we use about $1.7 million each year for FTA. We use about $1.7 million of Federal Transit Administration 5307 funds. I'm looking at Sean nodding. You correct me if I go wrong on this. To fund our transit system, and the rest we have to backfill, in essence, with Transportation Development Act money, TDA Article 8 money. To the extent that we can lessen the burden on TDA Article 8 money to use for public transit on the one hand, we have more money to maintain our roads on the other. So there's more, so I have to take that balance into account. So with all of that in place, my view is that we should award to VTS because I think that would be a more fiscally responsible decision and in line with keeping a local contractor, a local vendor who would utilize obviously our vehicles. They'll utilize their folks, and that's where I'm coming from. So let's keep going, because I don't think we have well, like I said, reasonable minds, and we're all reasonable minds. We can differ reasonably on this.
Does the council have any concern or thoughts regarding the experience with federal funding? Because I know that was something that was brought up in the report, and I just wanted to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I have struggled with that a little bit. What I heard, and I don't want to mispronounce your name, what I heard Ms. Pontecchi, sorry about that, indicate is that they have retained a federal, they have retained someone with a great deal of federal transit experience. The only question mark I had is whether or not that person is familiar with federal, from a federal compliance standpoint, and I believe that the answer to that was yes. Let me ask the city attorney this question. If we were to award the contract to VTS with a condition that VTS demonstrate to us or otherwise bring on someone who has that, it's on table 1, who has that federal transit experience in transit data, this is transit data reporting, would we be able to do that in our contract?
I mean, if that's the direction, yes. I think you would probably just want to make sure you have enough time for, you know, when you would need that to be affirmed, because there is a transition period here that we need to keep an eye on.
Would it be appropriate if I were to ask the prospective vendor that question at this point?
You've asked plenty of questions, sure. You can ask anybody that question.
Let me ask you that question. Would VTS be willing to provide assurances to the city that from a transit data reporting standpoint, in terms of VTS's knowledge of federal requirements, if it turned out that city staff believed that there wasn't sufficient expertise currently at VTS, that VTS would commit to bringing, because there are a lot of consulting firms out there that do federal transit reporting compliance, we know that. Would VTS be willing to bring that person on board?
Yes, that is correct. And the person that we discussed earlier is already committed to being on board with us. So we actually already he was the transit manager for the city of Calabasas. He's since retired and is on board with us. So he would be moving ahead with us with this contract. If for some reason it was felt that he wasn't providing what was being sought out, then we could retain an additional firm, but I can't imagine anything falling outside of his existing knowledge.
And that person has federal transit data reporting experience and expertise that he obtained from working with the city of Calabasas?
Yeah, he was the transit manager for the city of Calabasas for 30 plus years.
Okay. And he filed FTA reports?
That's
in
correct.
In conjunction with that position?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Mayor, if I could, if I could make the suggestion, if the council's not going to accept the staff's recommendation that we bring this item back to allow us to do some further due diligence and research as opposed to the firm that you may choose to go with, if that's possible. I'm not sure if we've had a chance to actually do that. I mean, there's a lot to this. That would just be my recommendation.
Do we have time to do it? I mean, it's May 6th. When would you be proposing to bring this back?
If I could add into that also, that would be one thing that we would need to analyze if we do have time. And I'll just add that, you know, based on the RFP, the proposals, the review, the interviews, formulating staff's recommendation for RTW, the same level of analysis and reference checks and due diligence was not performed to VTS, is why we didn't bring a recommendation to council to choose between the two. So the recommendation is RTW based, and I agree with city manager that it would be, I think, to have as much full information for the council to consider to make a decision. Would there be a time to provide additional analysis?
Well, I appreciate that, but a concern that I have about that is that given the lateness of the hour, it's May 6th, we've got a contract that's expiring on June 30, right?
Correct.
I don't want to be in a position where the council is told, well, we've got to really foreclose your options, and the only option, and there's no disrespect to RATP on this at all, but you're going to have to re-up with RATP for a year, and we're going to have to conduct negotiations. In other words, I don't want to be behind the 8 ball because we're so far down the road here. I mean, we have less than 60 days. So how do you respond to that?
Understood.
It would still be doable, right? Like if we were to table this and, I mean, I stated from my comments that I was concerned that I didn't have all of the information, and it's such a big contract, it's such a huge impact in our city, that I would prefer that staff take the time to fully evaluate and bring that information back. I think that's really the safest and most responsible thing to do at this point. And so there would be enough time, let's say, if you were to bring it back, if we were to bring this back.
Perhaps I could inquire the city manager, when would it come back?
Next meeting.
Next meeting.
Oh, okay.
22nd, I believe.
Councilmember Santangelo.
Yeah, knowing that this due diligence wasn't done the same for VTS, I would have a tough time voting for them at this moment without that being done.
Speaking for myself, I'm a little concerned that the due diligence wasn't done for all of the proposers, but that's a separate issue. I'm concerned that it was done for just one of the proposers. Vice Mayor Kildee.
Yeah, I share, I've been through a lot of these. I should share that concern, but it would seem to me that it's a local firm. It shouldn't take too long to really do what needs to be done. I wouldn't think. So if in fact that's what the majority of the council wants to do, we want to make sure we get this right. Mm-hmm. That is paramount, that we get this right, and it's a very challenging, contract because it's transit. So we want to make sure that we get it right. we don't want to put the council behind the 8 ball, that we don't have enough time to fully, engage ourselves in making the right decision on this. So if in fact that, this is just me as one council member, if in fact we can bring it back in a reasonable amount of time, which appears to me that we ought to be able to do it by the next meeting, I could support that, but I would not want to go past the next meeting on this.
Councilmember Tennyson.
I guess I'd like to make a motion that we table this item to the next council meeting so that staff has adequate time to do the same due diligence on the second RFP applicant.
I'll second.
Just an inquiry, I'm just, as I understand the motion, it's actually to continue this item, not to table it, but to continue it to the next regular council meeting of May 22? Am I counting it? May 20? Do I understand the motion correctly? All right, and the second understands that motion as well?
Yes.
Okay, I have one question before you vote on the motion. Does staff have a good idea through, it's a long conversation tonight, but does staff have a good idea of what council members need to see in terms of information?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Martinez Bravo,
Yes.
Councilmember Santangelo,
Yes.
Councilmember Tennyson,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Kilby,
Yes.
and Mayor Tremblay.
Yes. All right. Thank you to everybody for participating in this item this evening. Thank you for our guests who came in from out of town. We appreciate that very much. That brings us to the end of our items. And at this point, then, we are adjourned.